And so let's come back to order and welcome Geoscience BC, Geological Survey of Canada.
So they're just in the process.
Richard Truman.
Hi, everybody.
Yes, welcome. Welcome. We're here to hear your presentation, and sorry, it's just 5 minutes on the agenda. We've had the chance to look at your presentation ahead of time, so thank you. Maybe leave a little time for some questions and comments would be great. Please begin.
Okay. Oh. Hi, everyone. My name's Richard Truman. I'm the Vice President of External Relations with Geoscience BC. And sorry, I have too many things on my screen at once. Where are we? There we go. So I'm joining you today from Vancouver in the territory of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh people. And with me today is also Dr. Steve Grasby from the Geological Survey of Canada. And he's the research lead on this program that we're talking about today. Next slide, please. Thank you. So for any of you who are new to Geoscience BC, the organization that I'm from, we're a not-for-profit research organization that focuses on public earth science, specifically focusing at the moment on critical minerals and metals, on cleaner energy, things like geothermal, that's why we're here today, and on carbon capture and storage. Next slide, please. So the reason we're here today is to provide an update on an ongoing program called the Garibaldi Volcanic Belt Geothermal Resource Assessment Program, a bit of a mouthful. The program is led by Steve Grasby, who's with me here today from the Geological Survey of Canada, and has involvement from, I think it was 7 universities, I think it was at the last count that I checked. So this is research into potential for geothermal energy throughout the Garibaldi volcanic belt, so roughly talking about from Squamish up into the southern areas of Tsilhqot'in territory. All of the results from this research are public and are helping to inform decisions and to attract some investment into geothermal energy in the area. Next slide, please. Okay, so we currently have 2 phases of this project. So phase 1 is complete. It's focused on the area around Mount Meager. The data, the mapping, and the reports that were published in 2021, summer of 2021. And we know that that research, as well as lots of other research that's been going on around the Mount Meager area for many years, has been instrumental in attracting some new investment there. So some of you may have heard from a company called Meager Creek Development Corporation, who have taken over the geothermal tenure for that project. Their decisions have been very much informed by the research that Steve and his team have been doing. We can move on to the next slide, which is slide 5, and I'm going to pass over to Steve to talk about phase 2, which is the ongoing research at the moment and what's coming up.
Great, thanks, Richard. And yeah, so we've moved from the focus of Mount Meager that we've done in phase 1, and now phase 2 is looking at a different volcano in the Garibaldi belt, the Mount Cayley area, which also has some history of exploration in the past and signatures of geothermal potential. So it's a similar kind of multidisciplinary research that we started last summer in 2021, and we'll complete the field work planned for this summer. This is work that we've been doing in consultation with Squamish First Nation, and they've been involved with providing environmental monitors and other assistance in helping plan our field work. The first part of phase 2, the work we completed last year, has already been published. It's available through the Geoscience BC website, and all the data that we've collected to date is available as part of that. And then we're just planning underway, trying to get our last scramble in to get the field program going for the end of August of this summer. And then we would have the final report of the work being done in 2023. Next slide, please. So just what to expect next, that we'll in August to late August be having research crews from the Geological Survey and a number of universities and students working out of Squamish and Whistler, staying at some local facilities in the towns there. And we'll be doing some work along the logging roads, the Squamish Road and others, just to access different areas. we'll have some helicopter support to reach the higher grounds, and that will be throughout the 2 weeks. But we also plan 1 day of a geophysical survey done by helicopter, and this is a little different because it's towing a big kind of donut underneath it, so it kind of stands out a bit in the sky when you see that. And that's just doing a grid survey over Mount Cayley that does a passive measurement that we can see into the volcano there. And then yeah, we just see this continued increase in geothermal energy potential of the Garibaldi belt, and hope to see this continue on and see some clean energy production from this area resulting from the research. And I'll just pass it back to Richard here.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. So yeah, just a bit of an aside, I guess. We're in fairly regular contact as well with folks at the province, and we know that there definitely is increased interest, in geothermal tenure through this area at the moment. Some of you may have heard some of that as well. So really, just to finish off before we have a chance for questions, just to talk about the potential for more research in the future. So we're looking at phase 2 at the moment, but there's lots of other areas that may be relevant for research. And so there is potential for a phase 3. Geoscience BC launched membership for the first time at the beginning of this year. And the reason for doing that from a community perspective was to try and involve you in planning for research themes in the future. So whether it's as individual communities or as a regional district, there's, we think, a really cool opportunity there to join Geoscience BC as an associate member. There's no cost to it, to make sure that you can be more active in those future planning conversations as well, right at the beginning as we're thinking about research ideas. That's all we have for you today, but keen to hear any questions that you might have.
Thank you. And this is excellent work. Appreciate the presentation. It was very short, and I would like to invite questions or comments from the directors. I see Chris Langell and Ms. Jewett and Director Rainbow. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Very exciting. Just curious, when you talk about green hydrogen, is that where you use geothermal energy to power the cracking of water into hydrogen and oxygen, or where does the hydrogen come in?
That's correct. It's using the energy from the geothermal system to produce the hydrogen from water.
Director Jewett.
Thanks very much. I was recently in Iceland and got to visit a geothermal plant. So just wondering about the size of these plants, what the footprint would be, how high up would they be? Would they be subalpine? And I guess what also has to come next as well is environmental studies, because I know there's goat populations in the Mount Cayley area, Mount Fee. So that's a couple of questions rolled in there.
Sure. You know, we kind of always like to say that the area, the footprint of a geothermal plant is the smallest footprint per gigawatt of energy of any renewable power. So if you compare it to any other renewables, it's the most condensed development for energy produced. So if you've been to Iceland, that's sort of the scale of those would probably be larger scale than, you know, what would be produced in the, let's say, Mount Cayley area. And in terms of ideal plant locations, you're going to have them down in the valley bottoms, just because you know, you want to be close. It helps with the production of the water, so you don't want to be high up on the mountain, because it's you have to pump the water all that much higher to get it out of the ground. So the best locations would be the valley bottoms.
Yeah, and I would just add to that as well, the point about environmental assessment and goat populations and things like that. I know for the folks that are working at Mount Omega, that they're kind of going at the very beginning of going through that process at the moment with the province. The province had asked me for some introductions there for the folks at Mount Omega, and the same thing, of course, would apply if there was anything relevant around Mount Cayley too.
Thank you.
Director Rainbow and then John.
Yeah, good afternoon. I used to live in Surrey, and I recall going to a townhouse, a new townhouse development there that was using geothermal energy to power the homes. And so there was the footprint was the actual homes. So I wonder, is is that a different process, or is it just a matter of a difference in scale between what they did there? There's nowhere near a volcano.
It might be a little different process where there is a system called heat exchange, where you take the summer heat from the house, you store it in the ground as a kind of a thermal battery, then you produce the heat during the winter. So you're pumping heat in and out of the ground through the year. So it's using it as a thermal battery storage of heat energy. So there you'd have some buried pipes underground that you don't see. So it's a smaller scale, but also it's a good point in the sense that, you know, when we might talk about electricity, you can produce from these high temperature systems in the volcanoes, but you can do a lot of stuff with this, right? You can use the heat for greenhouses. And if, like someone mentioned that being in Iceland and they produce the hot water, they make electricity, then the water comes out of the electrical plant still really hot, like 90 degrees Celsius. And then you can use that to, you know, heat a greenhouse system or something like that nature. There's a lot of other things that could make use of the green energy supply, and it's more than just electricity, and is a lot of it is heat.
Thank you.
Dr. Stoner?
Thank you through the chair. Thanks for the presentation and interesting work. I'm just have a request if you could provide the regional district as well as the district of Squamish and maybe the RMOW, I'm not sure, with a heads up before the helicopter survey day, just so we can put notification out, because we often get questions when there's interesting helicopter activity, just so we can direct our citizens to not worry too much.
Sure, and I think we have their details already, but just to check, who would be the best person to send that information to at the regional district?
I believe it's our comms folks or to CEO Delta.
Our CAO.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, will do.
Yes. Imagine the questions. That was a good idea, Jenna. Anything else? Okay, gentlemen, this is really good work. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Thanks for giving us
Have a
the
good
time.
day.
For a change of pace now, wood fiber LNG,
Sweet.
Squamish, Christine Kennedy, Julia Diamond,
This diamond should be,
Julia Diamond.
yeah.
Pardon me.
Say welcome to Julia Diamond. And are we expecting Christine as well?
Laura Prosper, I thought, was doing this.
Appears to be a couple, getting multiples of Julia in the waiting room.
Oh, perhaps it's all under, yeah,
Under her name,
I'll admit only the 2 weeks.
taking 3 diamonds here.
Oh, yeah, that's, the first one is Laura Prosper. Second one is
Welcome,
Julia.
Laura, Christine, Julia.
Hi there.
Hi there.
Good afternoon. Hello. Hi.
So the board meeting today, we only have a few minutes for your presentation, and please begin.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen here, and then Laura's going to take us through the presentation.
Thank you. I've shared the screen. Just let me know when to advance the slides.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the SLRD board for having us here today. And I'm grateful to be speaking to you from the traditional and unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam First Nation. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today to give you a project update. We are very committed to being open and transparent, and are very happy to come meet with you and any of your constituents in your areas about our project as needed. WLNG is committed to a quintuple bottom line approach where the community comes first. If you could advance to the next screen, thank you. This means maximizing benefits for local people and First Nations in terms of family supporting jobs, business, procurement opportunities, and revenues that make reinvestments in the community by our company and by governments also possible. If you could advance to the next screen. These here represent our vision and commitments. The WLNG key commitments that are outlined here are maximizing local benefits to the community and First Nations, generating revenue for the country, for Canadian LNG, supporting the global energy transition to preserve the climate, considering the needs and demands of our customers in Canada and overseas markets, and creating a showcase project that benefits the company. Those 5 C's represent our core value of our parent company, RGE. Next slide, please. WLNG will be the cleanest LNG facility in the world, and our emissions profile will be very low. We are committed to doing everything we can to avoid, reduce, or offset emissions, and are developing a net zero pathway that will align with government climate targets and commitments to be net zero by 2050. We are the first company in Canada to have an Indigenous government outside of a treaty as an environmental regulator. We have a meaningful impact benefit agreement with First Nations to support nation capacity and ensure members are first in line for jobs and business opportunities related to our project. These agreements include an equity option with nations, and the discussions are underway. Next slide, please. This slide outlines in detail some of our partnerships with the Indigenous peoples. Next slide, please. For the workforce development, there will be up to 700 jobs during peak construction, which is 2025, and about 100 jobs in operations starting in 2027. We are currently internally developing a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan, and we have people and women of color represented at all levels of our organization. As you may recently know, we have a new president. Her name is Christine Kennedy, and she came from the provincial government, and it's been a fabulous transition to have a woman president. We are very proud to provide meaningful jobs for people like myself who reside here in Squamish, young people, underrepresented organizations and groups, and many generations to come. Next slide, please. This slide here, it represents our relationships with other governments. We have strong relationships with the BC government and a dedicated team in place to support that one-stop window. Next slide, please. As you may or may not know, we have recently issued a notice to proceed with McDermott International, and we currently have $500 million of US funds approved for spending this year with focus on local contractors. The hiring process will be District of Squamish, Squamish Nation, Province of British Columbia, and Canada First. Next slide, please. The pre-construction work will begin this year. We have approved spending of over $25 million Canadian for pre-construction work, and the additional site remediation and refurbishment will consist of the removal of the concrete slabs and the rail line decommissioning, which is important to the site. As you know, it has a landfill on the site, and so the landfill closure and capping will enhance the environmental performance and, of course, improve the water quality. Next slide, please. Information sharing and engagement is important, and as you may or may not know, I reside in the District of Squamish, and there are many constituents here in Squamish who are interested in the type of engagement that we do. So we are currently developing our management plans and are increasing our stakeholder relations and engagement in order to maximize those relationships. And community engagement also will work very closely with the District of Squamish community partnership programs. And that is funding that is open to the SLRD constituents. It is called the Community Partnership Program, and it's underway, and applications for any nonprofit can come in through our website, and the deadline is June 2nd for that. We also, later on this year in 2022, We'll be undertaking information sessions in Squamish to ensure that diverse viewpoints are reflected within our operational plans. Next slide, please. As you can see, this is a picture of our wonderful site. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask myself or Julia Diamond or Jane Charnowski, who is also on the call with us today. Thank you very much for your time, and we are open to any questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And I'm looking for questions, comments from the directors. I am seeing Kathy Jewett and Jenna Stoner. Please go ahead. Kathy?
Yes, thanks very much. Just wondering about the material coming in. I'm sorry, I don't know very much about it. Is it coming in by pipeline into the plant?
So this project is actually a provincial project, and it spans from northeastern BC, where Fort St. John is located, and we are getting the gas from the Montney region there, which has been certified as the cleanest in Canada. It is being piped down throughout the province and then to our site, which will be under construction in 2023. It'll take about 4 to 5 years to build, and then after that time, it will be turned into LNG at the site and then exported overseas.
And at what stage is the pipeline at?
So any pipeline questions actually should be deferred to Fortis BC because they are responsible for the pipeline. But I'm happy to follow up with any questions. If you have anything specific that you're interested in knowing, I can relay that to their team.
Okay, and how does the end product leave? It leaves in ships?
That's right. So it will leave in LNG carriers.
And has there been an assessment about the habitat of the cetaceans and the other marine life in Howe Sound and the effect of the shipping on them?
Yes, absolutely. So we have very strict regulations with the environmental assessment regulatory, provincial regulatory body. Julia, if you want to speak to term pool, maybe that will help answer Kathy's question.
Sure. Yeah, and I just want to expand on the point that many of our management plans that are required by our environmental certificate relate to marine life and marine mammals. So yes, as Laura mentioned, very strict requirements in terms of the conditions that must be met in order for the project to proceed to the construction phase, and all of the conditions being accepted by the provincial government to do so. Term pool is a voluntary initiative with the federal government, and it's basically a full risk assessment of a worst case scenario so that we can prepare mitigation measures to address those risks if they were to come to life. So we are continuing those assessments and putting in place measures such as reducing the speed of the ships that will carry the LNG, etc. Thank you for your question.
Thank you for your answers.
Director Stoner?
Thank you through the chair. Thanks so much for coming today. It's nice to see you folks again. I asked this question when you come to the District of Squamish, and I'll ask it here in terms of coordination with Fortis BC and the pipeline. And so appreciate the efforts towards potentially doing more community engagement in the coming months. Laura, as you mentioned in your presentation, one of the challenges that we have in our community, and I think at this board, is that this project, although it's two separate companies, is often seen as one project with cumulative impacts across our communities. And so I'm curious what Woodfibre LNG is doing to coordinate with Fortis BC so that our communities understand those cumulative impacts and have one point of contact.
So I'll start, and then I'll have Julia add to the answer. Thank you, Jenna, for your question, Councillor Stoner. First off, we are aligning with Fortis internally and externally on a number of different initiatives. And the first one that we are doing right now is the Community Service Infrastructure Management Plan the CSIM. And they have recently completed their CSIM, and we are starting ours. So engaging the community through community tables, through Squamish Nation and First Nations groups. It's very important to us. We have weekly meetings with Fortis and then bi-weekly meetings as a larger team with Fortis to make sure we're in line and engaging the community. And if there's any concerns, to mitigate those concerns. So I think actually it was the District of Squamish in a number of meetings with your staff have said, you know, we want to see this project as one project. And through environmental regulations, we can't do that. It is two projects, but through the community engagement and addressing those cumulative impacts, we align and we are strengthening those ties as we speak. So I think we're working very hard to ensure that even our community donations, sponsorship, any sort of engagement within the District of Squamish and the surrounding area coincides with two projects where we can be effective and also minimize our footprint within the community.
I have one one additional question, which is just an update on your most recent EA amendment. And I think this is probably also very relevant to Area D in terms of the proposal to house your workforce on a floating vessel. And I'm just curious where that amendment is sitting and if it's been approved by the province or if we're still waiting to hear.
Julia, do you want to jump in on the flotel?
I don't want to speak out of inaccuracy, so we'll take that away and get back to you. Thank you.
See Director Pettingill, but Director Rainbow, please proceed first.
Thank you. Laura, good afternoon. I would just a request for you on your government page. Could you add the SLRD? We've had a number of conversations with you over the last years. And I hope you feel that we're working cooperatively with you. And I didn't see us on that page. I saw Squamish and the provincial government and the Squamish Nation, but not the SLRD.
Absolutely, we'll definitely do that, Tony. Thank you very much for pointing that out.
Director Pettingill.
Yeah, I could probably spend the day asking questions, but no, we're on a tight timeline. So I just, you know, there's frequent references to cleaner than this or that or the other thing, and it's usually in reference to something that's sort of the worst of the worst. But just want to clarify that this is far greater emissions than renewables or conservation and other alternatives. And so while it's, you know, depending on who you talk to, may have slightly lower emissions than some other alternatives, it also has far greater emissions than a number of things. And, you know, sort of thinking of the IPCC context here, where it's basically our survival depends on us moving away from fossil fuel full stop, and we can't substitute one fossil fuel for another. So this really, it is still a fossil fuel with far greater emissions than a lot of other things like the geothermal we just heard about. Is that accurate?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Pettingill. I do want to mention actually to the SLRD that I reside in Squamish and I have the privilege of living in northeastern BC. And that is where the Montney region is and where we are extracting the gas from to be piped down through the province and out to Squamish and then to export it. It's very important to me and people that I know to understand that this gas here in the Montney region is certified and it's the cleanest of clean in Canada. And people's livelihoods and economic prosperity will depend on this within the whole province. So we are doing everything we can, and we are reaching our climate goals for net zero for 2050. We are working closely with government organizations, and I'm very proud to be representing the wood fiber project with knowledge of northeastern BC in where they work very hard for economic prosperity and down through to the District of Squamish.
Yeah, I'm just wondering though if you could answer the question, which this is still a fossil fuel that we're talking about, correct?
Julia, do you want to answer the question?
The way that we understand our project is that LNG is a transition fuel and help support the energy security point of transition that we are at globally. Our project will be 1/10 emissions of a standard LNG facility. And we, as Laura mentioned, are developing a net zero pathway to ensure that our project aligns with climate targets to be zero by 2050. And that includes our facility and potentially our upstream and downstream emissions as well.
Thank you.
Which
Do
would
other
be net zero emissions.
questions or comments? Because I think we will end here, and thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you very much for having us today. And it's our first time presenting to the SLRD. So I just wanted to say that if any of you would like us to come to your region and meet with you one-on-one or meet with your staff, we're happy to do so. And of course, we're happy to answer any questions. I will make sure that all of you have our contact information for Julia, Jane, and myself. Please don't hesitate to reach out. And as we expand our engagement throughout 2022, and we're looking at the procurement and business opportunities that align with Squamish Nation and wood fiber in general, I'm happy to answer also any business questions that maybe potentially local businesses in your community would like to know, and then you'll have the information for small and medium-sized businesses as well. Thanks again for having us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
I see Director Needham here. Welcome. We're just at the consent agenda. Is there something to be pulled from that agenda? Director Demare would like to pull
5.2.4.
1.2.4, Minister of Transportation, the Road 40 letter, yes. And we will move that. I'm waiting for Kristen to give me a number.
12.3.
12.3. So with that item removed, could I have a motion for the consent agenda? Otherwise, Director Richmond, Director Rainbow, anyone opposed? Seeing none, motion carried. Correspondence for information, 5.2.1. Or is that all part of the consent as well? Okay, item 6, business arising from the minutes. I'm not seeing anything. Committee reports and recommendation. We have 7.1.1, request for decision, temporary use permit number 72. J. Demerit Electoral Area D.
Just a minute.
Okay, I'm just waiting for Area D Director to catch up to us. And I suspect that's why Director Needham is here as well for that item.
Yes, and Ms. Quaterniak is also.
Oh, she's beaming in?
Yes.
Okay. Here she is.
Okay, where are we having a start from first?
Welcome, Ms. Quaterniak. What are we having first?
Let's start with a
I'm not
summary
sure.
or
Will you be presenting on this item, Director Needham?
I believe Ms. Quaterniak will be.
Good afternoon, directors. So I can summarize this TEP application once again. So this pertains to a 2-year temporary use permit for an event in the Upper Squamish Valley. The applicant indicates that this event is a charity fundraiser for Captain's Camps, the leadership program for teenagers in the Sea to Sky region. They're proposing an event with up to 150 attendees to take place on Saturday, June 4th, with music playing from 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. The attendees are offered an option to arrive a day early to set up, as well as to leave the day after on Sunday. So there will be no accommodations provided by the applicant, but the attendees are given the option to camp in a tent or a vehicle. In terms of water and waste, all such necessities are proposed to be brought on site and removed upon the completion of the event. The applicant is proposing to build a stage for the DJ, but that will require a building permit. And because there is not enough time to complete a building permit application this year, the applicant has proposed to instead host the event on the ground. So within the ALR, which is the case for this property, up to 10 yearly gatherings of this size are permitted on land classified as farm. The subject property does not currently have farm status, which means that at this time, a permission from both the ALC and the SLRD is required to host such an event. So the ALC application has been forwarded to us for review as well, and it is also part of this board agenda. The TUP was presented to the AD earlier in May, where it was requested that the Ashley Creek Foundation is contacted for comment. The Ashley Creek Foundation did a response and stated that they're overall not supportive of the application as proposed. The foundation expressed concern in regards to an increasing number of events taking place in the Upper Squamish Valley on agricultural land with no intention of utilizing the land for farming activities. It was also noted that commercial camping took place on the property last year with no communication or cooperation with the neighbors. So this concludes this summary. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you.
I haven't got many questions, I've got some comments. First of all, let me just clarify oh, I'm sorry.
I just maybe before you do that, Director Pettingill, yes?
Yeah, a couple questions. Just to confirm, it's the attendees or is it the performers and so on that can set up a day early and leave a day after?
So it is the attendees as well as the hosts that will be there a little bit early.
So when it's attendees, wouldn't we normally consider that a 3-day event, sort of 2-night, 3-day, as opposed to a 1-day event? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
that certainly makes sense. But it was an application for just 1 day.
Okay, the other question I had, looking at, and I'm not sure if this is correct, but it sort of seemed like there's a charitable foundation that's running the event, but the money it raises then go to a private company that operates the camp at the same place. And so it's although it's the foundation running it, it seems that it ultimately is benefiting a private for-profit camp. Is that correct, or am I misunderstanding the sort of relationships there?
Yeah, that appears to be the case.
Okay, thank you.
Director Rainbow? Yeah.
I just want to clarify, the Ashley Creek Foundation is the name for the community association for the whole of the Upper Squamish Valley. So, they are definitely opposed to this. Director Pettingill just brought up a couple of things that I wanted to mention. Yeah, the application for a 1-day event, but we're going to allow people to come early, we're going to allow them to stay late. You know, a rave by any name would smell as foul as far as I'm concerned. That's what this comes to. It's what it is. So we shouldn't mince words on that. My overall concerns here, other than to support the position of the Ashley Creek Foundation, is what is happening in the Upper Squamish Valley. You know, we are on the one hand investing in the improvement and increase of farming, and we're really wanting to improve food security in that whole of that part of the region. We're putting money into that, staff time. We're supporting voluntary, not-for-profit societies that are also working in that direction. So we're doing that on one side. And then on the other side, we're looking at activities which have nothing to do with farming, which don't improve the quality of life in that area. This particular one, an application for a TUP, and the money is going, it's a fundraiser. Well, immediately your emotions are kind of, oh, well, it's a fundraiser, it must be okay. But is it? You know, a fundraiser for what? The person that runs the foundation is the person that owns this piece of land and is operating this event. I've asked around what activities have happened, what activities, what sports camps, what soccer camps has this foundation provided in Squamish? I can't find an answer to that. Now, it may be because they haven't been well advertised. It may be has involved a lot of kids. My grandchildren play soccer in Squamish, and they've certainly not heard anything about it. So I just have a whole question about that as well. You put in, it's a fundraiser for kids, and we immediately start thinking, oh, well, this is very positive. We should support it. But should we? When I was fundraising for the food bank in Surrey, we would have organizations come to us and say, we'd like to do a fundraiser for you. And we'd have questions. We want to know, okay, what's the budget for this event? You say you're going to raise funds for us, but how much is the owner of the club or the owner of the restaurant or the owner of the land? How much are you paying them to use them? What are the costs of the fundraiser, and what's the benefit to the society? And we want those answers. And I would like to see those kinds of answers here, particularly as we're looking at something which is going to upset a lot of people. It's certainly not for the benefit of the residents of Squamish Valley. It's for the benefit of people from the Lower Mainland. It's for the benefit of the landowner.
Am I hearing a motion to not approve this temporary?
Oh, I am opposed to it, so I don't think you can make a negative motion, can you? But I will certainly be, if someone makes this motion, I'll certainly be voting against it and encouraging all of you to vote against it.
All right, in that case, Director Stoner? Oh, Director Crompton as well.
Thank you through the chair. A question to staff. So on the map that was provided in the application, there's lines that suggest that the actual event will happen on the island and that there's a working roadway and pathway that crosses the river. And I just want to confirm that that's actually that's a legitimate roadway and walkway, and we're not just sending 150 people through the river to get to the island.
So there does appear to be some sort of pathway. I'm not entirely clear on how legitimate the pathway and how solid and whether it can handle this type of event. They are proposing some improvements to this pathway as well, as a way to prepare for the event.
Okay, that does raise some issues, because if you're going to do in-stream work, it has to be within the fish window, and so that raises some questions. But subsequent to that, I was also just curious. It says in the staff report that if this did have farm status, they would be allowed to host 10 such events. And if it's just a private property, they're able to apply for an event permit or a TUP. I think in other circumstances like this, we don't necessarily judge the quality of the event. As a government, we just have a process as to whether we allow events or not. Is that correct?
So, and if they did have farm status, they would be allowed this type of event without any permits whatsoever.
Thank you for that clarification.
Director Crompton?
This is a legitimate organization that does soccer camps all over the place, and my kids have participated, and I just would think it's important to clarify that this isn't someone dressing up as though they do this kind of work. They do it and have done it for a while. And I share Director Stoner's, I'll say it for myself. I think the idea that we allow 10 of these on agricultural land anyway, and that we deal with process rather than whether or not we like the event in particular makes a lot of sense to me. Thanks.
And Director Pettingill, and then Director Rainbow.
Yeah, thanks. Two things. I'm just curious about why a 2-year TUP. Is that what the legislation requires? If this is a one-time, one-day event, why not just a much shorter permit?
So a TUP is the typical term is 3 years, and then the applicants can renew for another 3 years. I have let the applicants know that they are welcome to apply for at least 3 years, and they wanted to apply for 2 years. They are in the process of obtaining farm status, so perhaps that is the plan going forward, to have farm status and to be able to host these types of events without any permits.
Okay, that actually takes care of my second question. Thank you.
Director Rainbow and then Director Jewett.
So they're applying for farm status, and when they receive farm status, they can then have 10 events a year. What's all that about? You know, and if that's true for that piece of property, then that would be true for any piece of property around there that has farm status. So we could end up in the Upper Squamish Valley of having 20, 30 or 40 events a year. Is that what we want? And I would say that we don't. Now, how is that possible? It's possible because the provincial government at some point put in that allowance that if you have a farm, you can have 10 events a year. And what I would suggest that was leaning towards was an established farm that wanted to run an event to support its farming activities. For example, the farm that hosts weddings, and the wedding is catered basically by the farm using the produce from the farm. That was, to me, what I thought that was all about. What we're looking at here is a proliferation of properties in the Upper Squamish Valley who really have no interest whatsoever in farming. Some of these properties, there's little farming going on, but they want to have the events. At the same time, as I said, we've got organizations, including our own, trying to increase the amount of farming that's happening in the valley. We've a farm that was once based in Squamish at a house that did really, really well there, has just moved out into the valley and is farming on land that the monastery own and on some land that they've just acquired. Those are the kinds of things we should be supporting. And if the current legislation allows for 10 events per year, I think maybe we should be advocating to have that changed. It's too loose. If it's just a question of once I've got farm status, now I can hold 10 events, that's too loose. I think they should be able to prove and show that they've got a working farm and that the event they're planning is linked to the activities of their farm. So if for us to look at this and say, oh, it fits the rules, so let's approve it. It's going against what we're trying to do in that valley. It's going against what the longtime residents of the valley want. And I think we should deny this TUP application. And I think we should look at ways in which we can further support the development of farming. Thank you.
Director Jewett.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if there's any policy that has been considered to go along with TUPs, like for instance, the number of events that could be held per year, like the consultation with neighbors, like environmental protections. Has there been any consideration of that?
Director Needham or Anna?
I can speak to that, Chair. We do have a temporary use permit policy. We don't have specifics related to events in the ALR or otherwise.
Okay.
Right. So with the TUP, you can't just make it a one of. It has to go for 2 years, and then it can be 10 events per year.
Actually, no, through the chair, one could apply for just a one-off event. Applicants have the ability to choose whether they want to apply for 1, 2, or 3 years for their TUP.
And so they have applied for a 2-year one in this case?
Yes.
could we amend the motion and grant them a 1-year TUP and say that we would extend it another year if everything went well as far as the use and the satisfaction of neighbors and that sort of thing?
Through the chair, yes, that's a possibility, and we would have to write that into the permit, that the permit could be extended for one additional year.
I'd like to propose that amendment.
Is there a seconder for that amendment? Seeing none, we'll go back to the motion. Oh, sorry, Director Crompton. Yep, okay, seconded. All in favor of the amendment?
Sorry, question.
Yes, sorry, Jenna, yes.
Was there a motion on the floor? I don't think we should put a motion on the floor.
We don't have a motion on the floor, that's right,
Oh,
sorry.
apologies.
Yeah, no, that's me. So you're just trying to amend what we're looking at.
Make that motion.
Second it.
So Kristen, are you following this? No. Okay, so we're looking at this, you are making the motion amended though, right?
I'm now amending the motion on the floor, correct? No?
Do we have it on the floor?
No.
I don't think so.
We do not have a motion.
No.
We have an amendment motion to a motion that didn't exist.
Exactly, thank you. So I'm not really cracking up here.
Yeah.
We can certainly change the wording of this, but it's not a motion on the floor yet. And I think I have Jenna and then Sal.
I'll make the motion that we approve TUP number 72 for a 1-year term with possible extension depending on the success and satisfactory, the success of the event in the first year.
Motion that we approve it for the year.
No.
For the year with a possibility to extend for 1 more year.
So that's what the motion is.
So that's the second that you're
So
working on.
can I ask, and this might be for Director Needham, but they would be entitled to apply again. So do we need that wording about with possible extension with successive, like, do we need that wording or would they
Yes.
just come back in a year?
That has to go into the permit that there's a possibility of an extension.
Okay, thank you.
And Director Demare?
Yeah, just looking back, like, this is more of a question or comment. But looking back at the TUPs for short-term rentals that were approved, I do believe for area C and area D, there were some conditions. And Ms. Needham, maybe you can comment on those conditions. Because the conditions were that if there were any complaints that the TUP from the neighborhood, that there would be that the TUP would be taken away. Am I correct?
Yes, through the chair. The board can place conditions on a TUP. So conditions could be that there are no violations of the noise bylaw or complaints from neighbors, etc.
So,
okay.
yeah, so looking at this application, we can put a whole bunch of conditions on it. And the TUP could be terminated due to if those conditions were not adhered to. And knowing that they're going for their farm license, whether they get it or not, at least this way, for this one event, it could just be a 1 day. It could be the conditions that, no, they can't, there's no overnight camping. And they have to adhere to the noise bylaw and so on and so forth. So make it a real 1 day event.
Thank you, Director Richmond.
Outside of the camping bit, I mean, it's part of the TUP process that they have to follow noise bylaws and all that sort of thing anyway. If we give them a 1-year temporary or a one-time only temporary use permit, there's nothing to pull back away from them. So they've already had the event, so if they violate noise and then parking and other issues like that, it's not like we can say, okay, well, you're not getting an extra because we've only granted them 1 year. They've made it difficult to reapply if they want to reapply prior to getting farm status. So I think the idea behind putting a 1-year term on it is to make sure that they do adhere to everything, like what you're trying to accomplish. So I think that covers it all if we go with a 1-year temporary use permit, except for the consideration of whether you allow camping or not. That's a different issue. So yeah, I just want to clarify that.
But you were saying that as an example. You weren't saying that you wanted to attach that. Okay. So we're just looking at the second that amended as proposed by Director Stoner. And is that good with you, Kristen?
So
Yeah.
I'm not sure that we have Director Stoner's wording that has that possible extension wording, but Director Richmond seems to not want to put that.
It's not, I was more under the impression we were going to look at saying, okay, here's a 1 year, so that lots of these concerns can be looked at, and if it's not a well-run event, then they can get a temporary use permit next year. I must have misunderstood the board. I thought that's the direction we were starting to look at, to give them a 1 year just to see how it goes. Sounds like they want a 2 years so they don't have to reapply next year, and hopefully by then, in their mind, after that, they'll have a farm status and therefore have a right to do it anyway. So my point is, if we're concerned about how this runs and how it affects the neighbors, let's give them a 1 year for temporary a TUP for 1 year, and if it goes well and they come back to us next year, then they'll have a good leg to stand on.
So I don't know if this is appropriate, but the way I read this, Mike, is just they're asking for a 1-day fundraiser event within 2 years.
Oh, so I misread that. I thought they wanted to be able to do it 2 years running.
Yeah, a 2-year term.
Okay.
I thought they wanted to do once a year
Alright,
for
so
1
then
day for
that
2
just
years.
makes more sense than what Director Stoner is saying. And so that makes sense, at least in terms of an amendment. And yes. So Matt.
So Director Rainbow had made a comment that the constituents in his area up that valley were not in favor of having this. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So then based on that and based on what the director for the area said, I'm going to support him. And I think we should think about that. He's the one that represents those people in that area. And if they're saying to him that they don't want this there, then we should take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Rainbow?
Yeah, I don't like the idea or the feeling that I'm getting that if someone applies for a TUP, then we grant it. I don't think application for TUP should guarantee that we're going to issue one. And I think we should take into account, a lot of other things. The community wasn't aware of this until it came to EAD last time. And once they were aware of it, they were extremely upset. So I think that we might want to look at how we go about processing these kinds of things. So maybe when somebody comes to us and wants this kind of TUP, we say to them, go talk to the community. Show us that you've got some community support. They're applying in the motion here, it says a 1-day fundraiser. But then in the notes, they talk about, oh, people are invited to come early and invited to stay late. We also say, well, they have to follow the noise bylaw. How are we going to enforce that? How are we going to, we had a complaint about a month ago at another property that is a farm, which had an event. And at midnight, it was still blaring away at well over 150 decibels. And the police were called and they eventually shut it down 12:30, 1 o'clock, something like that. How are we, regardless of what it says here, how are we going to police that? How are we going to check on the parking? How are we going to sort of assess the impact on that community? And, you know, it may be different in the municipalities. You can issue a TUP, somebody's got a park that they can play in or whatever, a confined area, and we're prepared to have that noise, and we've got the RCMP on hand to shut it down when we need to. This is different. And I really think we need to pay attention to the community, and I don't think we need to issue this permit. And to go to Director Crompton's comment about the Rise and Shine Foundation being legitimate and so on and so forth, it may well be. I wasn't saying it wasn't. I was saying I haven't seen any evidence that it is. So if somebody wants to come to us and say, we want to run a fundraiser for this particular charity, they should give us some details. You know, if they say we want to raise for the Red Cross, we don't need details and we know what the Red Cross is. But what have Rise and Shine done? And they must have a list of events and workshops and camps that they run. So they should be providing it to us. And they should be giving us some indication of what the financial arrangements are. You know, how much they expect to raise from the gate, how much are they having to pay the performers, how much are they paying for the rent for the place, and how much is actually going to go to the foundation, which is run by the person that owns the property. I think we haven't asked enough questions. And I still say I'm opposed to this, whether it's 1 day, 1 year, 2 years, I'm opposed to it.
Okay, thank you. I think Director Weeb, yes?
I just, I'm just curious. So when someone applies for a temporary use permit, like it does say in point 8 here, takes effect on May 25th and expires on May 25th. So, and that they would, and then the next thing it says, any application to amend this shall be considered a new temporary use permit application. So would they not have to apply again for the day before and the day after? And does anybody ever have to put what their event is going to be? Like, we're going to have a rodeo, or we're going to have a concert. Like, do they not have to put that in there? Like what they're going to, I'm just curious. So to me, it would be like you would need 3 temporary use permits by the way this reads. And I would kind of like to know what the event is going to be.
It's a rave.
Director Needham, please go ahead and answer that question.
Yes, they do have to specify what the use is, because it is this is a land use permit.
Mm-hmm.
So they are having some sort of music event. They were proposing to have a stage, but they're going to have a building permit for that. So they've said that he won't have a stage for this year. So it's like an electronic music event that they're proposing. And why they've asked for a 1-day permit when it sounds to me like they want to do this for 3 days, I have no idea.
Okay.
Call the question here. Is there? Yes.
Director Crompton.
Oh, I didn't see them. Director Crompton and Director Pettengill, please proceed.
I think it's difficult to hit a target that you don't know exists. These folks have gone through the process that we've laid out, and if we don't like our temporary use permit process, then maybe that's something we bring back. But we put a lot of thought and energy into developing it, and I think it's important that we support the processes that we have in place. If EAD or this board wants to, relook at how we do the temporary use permitting process, I wouldn't be opposed to that. But I think requiring an applicant to meet targets that we haven't shared with them doesn't make a ton of sense. So I'll be supporting the motion.
Chris?
Yeah, thanks. At this point, I'll listen to the rest of my colleagues. I'm not sure I can support this. For me, it's not clear how this aligns with an agricultural use or how this supports that. And I understand the province's rules when they get that may allow them to have this sort of event. I would assume, though, there are other things tied with, and maybe it's not a fair assumption, but with having a farm designation. The other piece is there are some missing pieces for me. So some disconnects in information in terms of, why I understood this is a one-time, one day, but they're asking for a 2-year permit. It sounds like it's actually a 3-day event. And so I guess I would have appreciated just a little bit better understanding. It does sort of seem too that this is a for-profit company. Ultimately, they've sort of split it up into a foundation and so on, but the money's flowing into a for-profit, and they may have a wonderful business that helps people, but it's still ultimately, the end of the day, a for-profit. And I guess I have some discomfort with that wasn't clear from the report, and that's the sort of thing I would sort of just want, sort of hope would be very, very upfront. And so when I think about, I understand when they get their farm designation, they may be able to do this anyways, but I tend to think that that doesn't mean, if there's a problem with what the province allows in farm areas, doesn't mean we should replicate that problem. And so maybe we don't say yes to the TUP and we advocate on the farm piece later. So that's kind of where I'm sitting at the moment, but I'll stew and think and listen a bit more. Thank you.
Director Stoner.
Thank you, through the chair. I'll be supporting the motion. I appreciate my colleagues' concerns around the risk that this exposes the community to, and I don't want to dismiss that. I think the challenge more broadly in the valley is not going to be made or broken on this one TUP. I think in some ways it's actually helpful to shed light on where these events are happening and start to articulate what the expectation is. If that event is going to be held, then the RCMP know it's happening and they can actually respond. And so I think part of this is bringing the community along and understanding what our process is for TUPs. As staff has mentioned, they are in the process of getting their farm license application, in which case we kind of become null in that process and they can do this anyways without our approval. I don't think that's reason enough for us to actually approve this TUP. And I don't think that just because they made an application, it means that this body would actually approve it. But I do think that given what I'm seeing in front of me, that there's an effort to try and make this work. And I hope that staff will go back to them and clarify that this is, as they've applied for, a 1-day TUP. And so they definitely need to stop advertising that this is going to be a 3-day event, because that's not what they're getting approved for. And if they want an approval for a 3-day event, then they need to amend their application. But I think that that is the process that we have laid out. I think it's fair for them to come forward with an application to host that sort of event, and appreciate that there are concerns from the neighborhood. But I would hope that by moving this particular motion, that it's a 1 year with the possibility of extension, kind of contingent, like with an earmark of how the first year goes, then that kind of holds their feet to the fire to be good neighbors. And so that is why I will support the motion on the floor. Thank you.
And on that note, I just want to clarify the motion on the floor.
Well, thank you. I have it just moved. I don't have it seconded.
No.
Okay. So it's not the first that in the agenda. That has not been, that was not my understanding to be part of the motion, which was just that the board approved temporary use permit number 72 to the numbered company for a 1-year term, in order to allow, with the rest of the wording, and then with the possibility of extension with the success of the event in the first year. We don't really have any parameters over what success means.
No. So that's a little vague, isn't it, for us to be working with without a seconder yet at this point? I'm just trying to get the meeting process right here, you guys. So yes.
I don't think we have to put a lot of measures in there for success. I think the success is, did they adhere to the noise bylaw? We gave them a 1 day. Did they try to push it and do 2 days or 3 days? Did they do anything outside of what was expected of them? So I don't know that we have to list those measures. It sounds to me that the board is going in a direction of saying, okay, look at, this is how our process is. Let's give them the chance to work within that process and do it right. If they do it right, they can come back and look at a second year. Right to me means they've respected all the rules. They've respected the noise bylaw. They've respected the neighbors. They set up a safe event. If at the end of the event, we find out that there was parking all over the road, the neighbors were really badly impacted, et cetera, then that will impact our decision next year if they come forward for renewal. So that's how I see the motion going. That's the way I see the direction of the board going right now. I've been really listening and going back and forth, listening to all the different comments. Totally hear Director Rainbow's concerns over it. I'm also just recognizing that we put a process out that they've filled, and I'm very much in agreement with Director Stoner. They need to be it needs to be made very clear if we go ahead with this, that this is a 1 day, 24-hour event. It sounds to me they're going, hey, we just want a 1 day, but we're going to stretch to 3 days and it's going to get messy. So they need to know that what they applied for, if we go ahead with this, is what they've gotten and nothing more. So staff needs to make that pretty clear if they ever expect to run another event. So with all that said, I would second the motion as it is. I don't think it's too vague. I think it just suggests that we approve a 1 year TUP at this point, and that we review it again next year if they want to come back for it.
So to clarify, you're seconding a motion that was just read for the 1 year as sort of amended by Director Stoner? Okay.
Sorry, and as well as the subsequent that about the authority to execute it.
And
So
yes,
those two, yeah.
And dropping the first one, we're not worried about the nesting birds. So we're gonna do these okay. Right now, the motion that you read, put forward by Director Stoner and seconded by Mike, is what we're gonna vote on. And it also includes the second that about be authorized to execute, because that makes sense, right? Okay.
Can I make a comment? I gotta make a comment, please. To Jack's comment about they've gone through the process, it's up to the board to decide whether they're going to approve the TUP or not approve the TUP. So just because they put a TUP in doesn't mean that they're going to automatically get it. I know my wife ran into a major problem with a TUP up in our area when she was a director. And with many comments coming back at her. And so it's up to us to decide whether we grant the TUP or not.
And I think that's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
but there's a judgment there. You know, this is an application for a TUP. They've gone through if they hadn't gone through the process, it wouldn't be in front of us now. They've got to go through that application process, and that's what it is. And we're told, some of us are making comments that we automatically grant it because they've gone through the process. And if we give a 1 year TUP now, what's to prevent him coming back in July, August, September for 1 day TUPs? Are we going to, if he goes through the process, if he goes through the process of the application, does he automatically get it? You know, this community is so opposed to these kinds of events in the valley that you all need to go up there one evening when one of these things is going on. And the shape of that valley is such that you can't get anywhere where you can't hear it. It is extremely disruptive. And it changes your weekend. So I fully understand why they're opposed to it, and I fully support them. And I'm disappointed that we're just saying, hey, he's a good guy and it's a good foundation, gone through the process, let's give it to him. And it's not good enough for me.
Chair, can I please speak to the way things are being suggested about what I said?
Stoner as well, after you, Jack. Yep, go ahead.
I certainly did not mean to suggest that because they apply, they receive a positive decision of this board. My suggestion was, if there are pieces of this process that we'd like to fix to give us more information than we should. If this fails, it fails, and we've decided against providing the temporary use permit. I did not mean to say that because someone applies, they are guaranteed a positive outcome. And so just want to make that clear. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi.
Director Stoner?
Jack spoke to what I was going to speak to, so thank you, Jack.
Okay. So at this point, there's a motion, seconded, it's been amended. I guess I could just ask who is opposed.
Is that what you're doing?
Well,
What do you?
I don't think, okay, if it's really close, then we'll do a show of hands then. So
Opposed? Do you know?
those people that are opposed to the motion, for a show of hands. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. 5, so it's split.
And did you catch?
Oh,
Director Pettingill?
Director Pettingill as well. Okay.
So I have Director Rainbow, Director Mack, Director Demare, Director Weeb, and Director Pettingill opposed.
So what, how about you?
So that
fails.
Yeah.
Are you opposed?
Yes, I also.
Okay.
am opposed.
So that's 6 in opposition. So the motion fails.
So this application for this temporary use permit fails.
Mhm.
And I'm sure staff will read back to the applicant. Thank you.
Chair,
Director Stoner, yes.
no, the motion failed, but we haven't actually, somebody needs to put, if they want to actually defeat the application, they need to put a motion forward that the board not grant the TUP, I think would be my understanding of process.
I don't
No.
think so. I was trying to go there, but I don't think you have that kind of emotion, right?
No, you don't
I
need
think we
a,
just
you don't need a
don't
negative
grant
motion.
Yeah,
We didn't grant it and staff goes back and says the applicant, your application was not granted. And I don't think we need a negative motion saying we don't support it. I could be wrong, but I
We
don't.
didn't support it. We've already done it.
so the motion was to support and the motion was voted down. And staff is prepared to provide feedback to the applicant.
That makes sense.
All righty, we're going to have a break at 2:30. Should I carry on here with the gas tax?
Yep.
7.1.2.
Take it on.
All right. The gas tax, Community Works Fund, Northern and Southern Preserve and Amenity Reserve Balance.
Oh, that's me. Sorry. That's a simple request.
Right.
I have some money allocated towards to pay for a bus stop. And we don't need that anymore. So I want to be able to transfer that money back to my general account.
So moved, seconded by Director Mack. And anyone opposed to that? Motion carried.
Thank you.
I think we've proven there are no simple requests, so. We don't do simple.
Okay. Yes, 5 minutes? 5 minutes.
Okay. Sorry.
Are you sure? I bet you're not.
We are.
You're gonna replay this
We are
over
back to
tomorrow.
business. We're on item
You don't wanna get in,
7.1.2.
It is a fine line.
Point three, we did point two. Please, yeah.
So we're just gonna welcome Melanie Hillmore. We're talking about gas tax, community works fund.
No, she's in
No.
for the next one.
Regional parks.
7.1.3.
No, it's on.
Okay. Oh, yes, of course we did. Okay.
We don't have alcohol.
I'm kidding. 7.1.3, electoral A, B, C, and D, respective regional parks and regional trails, service establishing bylaws, and this is something that Ms. Helmer's been working on. And I welcome you to speak to this. Melanie, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll touch on it just briefly, and I'm happy to take any questions if there are any. Melanie Hillmore, Director of Strategic Initiatives. You have before you 4 bylaws today. The board resolution was to do these concurrently in order to be a more efficient process. So all 4 have been drafted substantially the same, with the only changes being to reflect each of the electoral areas. There is usually a process whereby a service establishment requires either an alternate approval process or assent voting, but in some very specific listed types of services, there are exceptions, and this is one of those whereby electoral area consent can be provided by the director on behalf of the electorate. And that is the recommended option, which is presented before you today because it is the most efficient and least costly option to move forward the service establishment process. Setting the bylaw up this way will enable each of the electoral area directors to review what they would like to set the tax rate at for each year in support of their particular regional parks and trails in their electoral area. And it can be even set at 0 or at whatever number they would think is appropriate in order to support that function. There is currently a bylaw in place, bylaw number 649, which is one of the attachments to the report, which had all 4 electoral areas together, but it did not give the electoral area directors the flexibility to set what the requirements are for each of their respective areas. And all of the directors, the taxes would have affected everybody across the regional district in the electoral areas rather than being specific to the area where the park is located and supporting those local communities. So if this is approved by the board today, then we would be looking for the electoral area directors to consent to each of their bylaws, and that would be forwarded off to the Inspector of Municipalities for review and approval. And when that came back, it would come back to the board for final reading and adoption. Financial considerations other than the tax rate, which I've referred to already, there are some reserve funds associated with bylaw 649. Some of those could be transferred across into the proposed bylaws. Some of them could not, and the funds would therefore need to be expended for the purpose that they were set out for before that bylaw could be brought back to be considered for repeal. Then those assets, whatever those funds were used for, those assets could then be moved into the respective electoral area park function. So I think that's the main things. From a regional perspective, this does support the regional district's mission to enhance the quality of life of constituents through the facilitation of regional and community services for the benefit of present and future generations, and the board's strategic priority of supporting regional parks and trails with clean and well-maintained assets and facilities. That I think wraps it up. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, let's just take questions at this point. Director Demare and
Can
then
I make
Director
a
Crowe.
comment?
Comment? Okay,
Yeah, I fully support this, and the one thing that we talked about at the EAD meeting was that we still could do individual community park service. And also, when it comes to time to actually put a tax requisition or a parcel tax in, that I'll be bringing it to the community for input.
okay. Director Crompton.
Thank you. And thank you for the report, Ms. Helmer. I was interested that on something as high bar as taxation, that we would use the single person decision-making tool. I've always thought that why we have regional districts is to protect decision makers with a board of people who will sort of carry that responsibility together. So can you help me understand why choose, and I know you've said it, but maybe just respond to my concern that we're missing a board of people making this decision together and that protection that it provides.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, it's a good question. There are some, as I was mentioning, a very specific list of things that the provincial government considers that they can be approved like this. Emergency planning is one of them. Regional parks and trails is one of them. Heritage is another one. Economic development is another one. These are areas that the province has deemed that instead of needing to go get electorate approval, they feel that the directors who represent each respective area are in a position to make that decision on behalf of their electorate. And that was brought forward in this case because, as I was saying, it's the least expensive and most efficient process. And in addition to that, there is a safety measure in that it has to go through the annual budgeting process, which starts with the electoral area director having those conversations with the director of finance to look at what the mill rate and tax implications would be to anything they considered, and then being brought to the board as part of the financial plan, which is all directors participate in, and it's a weighted vote. So there's still an oversight piece by the SLRD as a whole as to what decisions would be made on an annual basis about taxation.
So and two questions to follow up, if I may, Chair. One is, if residents felt that the decision that was made was incorrect, they could appeal to the board of the regional district to not include it in the budget, or is there an alternative mechanism that they would have if they disagreed with the decision of the electoral area director?
Yeah, okay. So first, there's a statutory period. There's a 30-day quashing period if this were to proceed to adoption by the SLRD board for the bylaw itself. And then after that point, if the bylaw was in place and they did not want to see taxation occur, they could certainly bring that matter to the attention of their electoral area director or to the board as a whole for consideration. These bylaws have also been set up to broadly allow for other sources of revenue as well, such as grants, donations, gifts, that kind of thing. So it could be that the tax dollars would be used for leverage and would be needed in order to provide that leverage, or the tax rates might be set at zero. That was one of the flexibility pieces that was linked in, recognizing that there's a strong desire to have parks and trails available at a local community level without creating an onerous taxation burden for the residents.
That's helpful for me. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
Thank you. I do have one question on the table on page 121 in my package. The $300,000 that's been set aside for the Seton Anderson Park. Ms. Hillmore, it's not there, is that because it's in a different category at this point in time? It's being tagged by Director Macrae, and it sits there unspent, but I don't see it in here. That was gas tax or PILT money, if I have that right.
Okay, thank you, Chair, for the question. So the only monies that are listed here are the ones that are currently sitting in the reserve funds associated with Bylaw 649. So if we've put aside other money that would be related to parks, but would not be currently sitting in one of those reserve funds, but that money is intended to be associated with a park that would fall under the Park Service, it could certainly be used for the purpose of supporting that park if the proposed bylaw is adopted.
Excellent. Other comments or questions? Request to move these.
Yes, thank you. Can we do them in like 4 separate
Blocks of 4?
Blocks
Okay, then
of-
we'll start off with the electoral area A regional parks, 1, 2, 3, 4. No, yes, 4. Area A, a motion to
3. Sorry, the first 3. That's.
I'll make that motion. Approve the first 3 that's for area A.
Lost it. Where's it gone?
Only the first 3,
Yes,
okay.
thanks.
And then the ones related to electoral area B.
You need a seconder.
Okay.
I'll second.
Seconded by Director Mack. Is it opposed? Seeing none, motion carried. Move on to the that's pertaining to area B. I'll move that, those that's, and seconded by Director Mack. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, motion carried. Area C.
I'll move that.
Moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Mayor. No one is opposed. Motion carried. And finally, D.
I'll second that.
And is anyone opposed? Carried. Thank you. 7.1.4. Now the regulatory bylaws in relation to proposed regional parks and trails.
Thank you, Chair. Were you looking for me to talk to that briefly or?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, so in addition to the assets that came out of the last report, there was also some discussion about whether there should be regulatory bylaws and also potentially fees and charges bylaw. At the Electoral Area Directors Committee meeting, it was recommended to the board that subject to these bylaws being adopted, the 4 that were just past three readings, that there be this be brought forward and that they be brought forward individually so that each of the electoral areas directors could look at the uses and requirements, regulatory requirements to ensure the safe and enjoyable use by all potential park users. So this would, as outlined in the report, provide signage that could be put up on what would be appropriate uses and what things would be prohibited from occurring within the bounds of those parks. Thank you, Chair.
Director Mack?
I'd like to move this.
Moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Demare. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, motion carried. That's my mind, a billion. All right. 7.1.5 elections bylaw amendment and cost sharing arrangements associated with conducting elections.
That's me. Would you like me to
certainly yours? Yes,
speak
please.
to this
Yeah.
or okay, thank you. So I have prepared a bylaw amendment for our elections bylaw. So, sorry, just orienting. So I'm also looking for authorization to enter into cost sharing agreements where needed. The school district, Sea to Sky School District has already been in touch asking if we can assist with conducting the Area C and Area D elections. So this would, we would enter into a cost sharing agreement with them for that. Haven't yet been requested by School District 74, but I may be, so this would also give that authorization. And so we have, this isn't new. Our bylaw aligns, so just to back up, everybody has to have the first advance voting on 10 days before general election, and then second voting opportunity. We have aligned with Area B and A and B is 5 days before general voting day. District of Lillooet does not have a second voting opportunity, so there's no alignment there. For Area C, we align with Village of Pemberton, which is 3 days before general voting, and Area D aligns with District of Squamish, which is 7 days before general voting day. I have been in contact with District of Squamish with respect to them being an additional voting location for Area D. We've done that in the past. For Area C, we share space with the Village of Pemberton. We have our separate, everything's separate, but we do share our space. And for District of Lillooet, District of Lillooet in the past has been an additional voting location. So they conduct voting as an additional voting location for Area A and B. I have been in touch with with Whistler and to see if they are able to assist in the same way that District of Lillooet and District of Squamish assist us. And I'm not sure that's gonna work out this year, but we're having discussions and probably most likely looking for something to happen in 2026. I've also put in here some general ideas of what the voting locations might look like. That is delegated to the Chief Election Officer. But there's some examples of what that may look like. And with the potential of trying to get, I'm looking into whether we can provide an additional voting location in Area C up in Devine, based on feedback received from at the EAD meeting. We haven't pulled together our staffing, what our staffing is going to look like, but we are a little bit with COVID and with the labor shortage that we're seeing. There are some concerns about being able to get enough people to staff. But once we have that staffing proposal put together in the coming weeks, I'll have a better idea of what that looks like. We've always gone with 2 election officials at each venue, but we're probably gonna have to go with 3 just to provide some extra capacity in planning for what may or may not happen with COVID in the fall. Oh, and one last thing, if you look on my staff report, there's a couple of policies that I'm looking to have rescinded because they're redundant or outdated, and one of them just wasn't picked up when it went to the EAD. So I'm just asked, there's also policy 3.2 be rescinded. So everything that's on the board agenda plus that policy 3.2.
So do we need a motion to rescind those two?
Well, we can do the first 3 readings of the election bylaw as one motion, then the adoption as a separate motion, and then everything else can go as a third. If we're ready to go there. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll move the first 3 that's.
Seconded
Oh, sorry. We have, because it's adoption, we have to do the adoption motion separate. So it would be the first that, which is the first 3 readings.
Okay. I'll move the first that.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Mack. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, the first that is carried. Second that. Moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Demare. I'm not seeing anyone opposed. Motion carried. The third that.
As well as the policy 3.2 be rescinded.
Sorry, okay, so add that, 3.1 and 3.2. Okay, the policies number 3.1 and 3.2 be rescinded. Moved by Director Rainbow, seconded by Director Demare. No one is opposed, motion carried. The fourth that. Moved by Director Mack. Seconded by Director Weave. No one is opposed, motion carried. Now, the fifth that, if requested by school district, etc., moved by Director Rainbow, seconded by Director Mack, no one is opposed. And the final that, moved by Director Demare, seconded by Director Rainbow, no one is opposed, carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are moving on to 7.1.6, the Britannia Beach track, correct?
Yes,
On
that's
both
right.
agendas, okay.
Mr. Francis covered in case of any finance related
Oh,
questions.
okay, and Suzanne LaFrance has beamed in. Welcome.
Hello.
So this is over to Director Rainbow. Yes, we deferred this.
Yeah, this originally was presented as an application for, and we were anticipating using a piece of SLRD land in Britannia for this pump track. But I'd assumed, along with staff and along with the people in Britannia, that would be relatively simple. It turned out not to be so, because there were various legal issues that needed to be checked, and variances that were required, and so on and so forth. And the project grew from what was going to take a few weeks to taking more than a year, and the costs grew up to about $22,000. And so we decided that we wouldn't proceed with that application. So rather than just scrap the whole thing, the BBCA is looking for, we think we found another piece of land which is not owned by the SLRD, which is privately owned, and we think we can do it there. So if what I wanted was to get this funding approved, so that if they can iron out all the details that they need to, that I'll have the money in place to be able to support them. So the intent is still to build a pump track for sort of 4 to 10-year-olds, that sort of age range. It's not a mountain bike, not a teenager or adult thing, and it's a way of getting the kids off the streets. Right now, they're riding their bikes up and down little bumps and across the street and up and down another little bump, and it's dangerous. We want to get them off the street and onto their own little track as soon as possible.
Sounds like you need to fix the bumps in the road. That's the problem.
So you're making this motion, Director Rainbow?
Yeah.
Is seconded by Director Mack.
Oh, I was supposed to cross something off the bottom of that. The subject to satisfactory agreement with BC Hydro is not required anymore.
Okay.
Sorry, it should just say, recommends to the SLRD board up to $10,000 from area D amenities funds be allocated to the construction of a pump track at Britannia Beach.
Yeah.
Period.
That's what we're voting on.
That's already been removed.
Oh, has it?
Yeah,
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong.
BEAD.
Oh, good. I'm looking at the wrong.
But I do have a question.
Sure.
Yes.
The up to 10,000, so do you want to keep that up to? or
Yeah,
just kind of-
because we've been offered some equipment without rental charges, and we're gonna have to rent something. So I'm not really sure exactly how much will be needed. So what I suggested was that they go ahead, make the arrangements and submit invoices.
So be reimbursed through receipts.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you need that written into the resolution?
I see Mrs. Front, so
Yeah.
she's got a question, but we could put,
Oh my goodness. there's
we
a whole
could
bunch of
add that with reimbursement.
Okay,
That
so maybe Suzanne France first, and then I see the other two directors. Apologies if I missed you. Director
Hi, yes,
France?
it's just a question to Director Rainbow. So just wondering where the land is located that the Britannia Beach Community Association has found for this pump track.
They're negotiating with a couple of people at the moment, not sure which one might come through, so I prefer not to say who they are at this time.
Okay, so there's multiple different areas they're still exploring. Okay.
Facilities, yes.
And so this will be paid based on invoices received from the
Yes,
Britannia
yes.
Community Association? Okay, thank you.
Director Pettigrew?
Yeah, so I think I was maybe looking for similar clarification. This is no longer in doing anything on BC Hydro property, and it's just private individuals are offering some property, and that's why we're able to separate the BC Hydro stuff out of what's been talked about previously.
And Director Crompton?
Sorry, I couldn't hear the response there. Is that correct?
Let me, I'm sorry.
BC Hydro is not part of the equation anymore. When it was on SLRD land, it was right underneath the hydro power lines. And so we needed permits from Hydro, et cetera, et cetera. We're not doing it on that piece of land now. Now, if the private land happens to be underneath BC Hydro, then that issue will come up again, but at the moment, it's not.
So that answers your questions. Go to Director Crompton.
Thanks, through the chair, I think to the CEO. Is there no concerns around liability, or we're investing money on a site that we're not aware of its location? And does our invested money expose us to any risk? I guess it depends on where the site is, right?
Yeah, at this point, because it's not an SLRD land, and because it's not an SLRD provided service, it's simply a grant to an entity that is going to create something and manage something, then our assessment is no. Had this been an SLRD land, then clearly there would be, because the service was offered on SLRD land, there would have been questions about liability, as well as questions about the need for ongoing funding, maintenance, et cetera, and some sort of an agreement with the entity, but not in this case.
And then I understand a grant to an organization. I guess who are we granting the money to?
Britannia Beach Community Association.
Okay, and then I understand a grant, we pay a bill. It seems to me, is there no difference between us giving a $10,000 grant and us paying receipts on a project that is being constructed? No difference between the two?
Is that question directed to me through the chair? Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question.
So I understand granting money to an organization like this. We do that regularly. what I understand is happening now is that Ms. LaFrance is going to be receiving invoices from this organization for construction work that's been done. And I just wonder, does that adjust our measurement of risk at all, or is it the same as having written them a check for 10,000?
I'll ask Ms. LaFrance to add to this or comment, but my sense would be no, and you know, in the end, the outcome is the same. I think the reasons for the up to were described here, but I'm not aware of that changing it, but I defer to Ms. France or ask her to comment.
Yeah, so I agree with your assumption. It doesn't change the actual liability, but what we're asking for is just the actual cost versus giving them 10,000, them maybe not spending it all and sending the funds back. We just kind of streamline it by saying, let us know what the cost was and we'll fund that cost. But up to 10,000 in the resolution just means that we're not going to be sending 10,000, and then if the cost is lower, they would just send the funds back. We're just circumventing that. Thank you very much.
I know Director Rainbow wanted to speak, but Director Pedicle, do you have your hand up again? Yes?
Yeah, if I can. It sounds like this might end up being on private property. And before, when it was going to be on SLRD land, we could sort of in the long term ensure that, you know, whatever benefits or sort of upgrades would benefit the SLRD and could ensure long-term public access. I presume that's not necessarily the case if this was public land, and this may just be my ignorance with regional districts and so on, but is that normal practice, or if something's going to happen on private land with a grant such as this? So I understand the association is a not-for-profit, but you know how the landowner fits in sort of improvements to land and ensuring long-term access. Do we have to care about any of that? How does that sort of fit into this?
I don't know if, and through the chair, good question. I'm not sure if that's been contemplated, and I think it would depend on the nature of the agreement for the land, whether it's purchased outright, whether it's a lease, whether it's a different form of agreement. And it's probably something that we'd have to look at once the acquisition of the land took place, or once we understood what that acquisition would look like. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's sort of off the top of my head, unless there's anything that anybody wants to add.
So we would possibly approve this grant, and then those details would be worked out later and may or may not make the grant viable at the end of the day, depending on whether we were comfortable with the access and liability and so on this possibly private land.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if our legal, and perhaps Kristen can weigh in. I'm not sure if our assessment of liability in the first instance, when it was going to be an SLRD land, covered this. But it's to me, it's challenging to understand what that liability would look like without understanding what the nature of the service will look like, what the nature of that land agreement will be like. But in my mind, this would be like granting money to a community organization that is building a playground or is building some other sort of facility that they're going to operate for the good of the community. I at this point, I don't see the liability, but it's certainly something that we will have to keep an eye on. Ms. Clark looked like she may have had maybe I'm putting her on the spot, but I detected over my left shoulder the urge to reply.
No, we don't know though where it's going, and that's been raised as we don't know. And there's nothing as worded that puts any brakes on this funding being provided to the BDCA regarding details about anything to do with the land. So if the board wants, so that would be something that isn't currently contemplated in the wording that in this wording that's been moved and seconded.
Yes, Director DeMayor.
I've seen this before, and it's caused a major issue in the community. where some community or association does something on private property, puts up a structure or whatever, and there wasn't a proper agreement from the owner of the property and the association. And in this case, it was Minto Communications. And it caused a real rift in the valley because of it. So it's imperative that they're, you know, to me anyway, looking at this and knowing what's happened in the past, is that there's an actual agreement between the homeowner or the property owner and the Raylord Community Association, or Raylord, the Britannia Beach Community Association. And I would say that the funding is stipulated on a condition that there is a written agreement, because it can cause issues.
All right, are we amending this?
Good question.
Yes, I think we're amending this motion.
We can withdraw it if you like.
Would you like to withdraw it?
Sure. Because what I wanted right now was just to give them an assurance that there was some money in place and that they could come back with a proposal. But if you're more comfortable, me just assuring them verbally that, hey, when you're ready, I'll put something in place to get some money. This might be a piece of private land. I didn't intend to say it was private, because it could be owned by, it could be Crown land, and it could be a piece of land that is on a motor land, but not under a power line. So their intent is to get kids, those little kids, off the streets and on somewhere safe. We can manage that financially by withdrawing this motion, forgetting about all those comments, and wait until we've got something concrete to argue about.
Excellent, okay. Motion withdrawn.
Well, it's been seconded.
So now we need to vote.
Well,
on
defeated them.
Withdrawing the motion. I mean, if the mover wants to withdraw the motion,
No,
then the
just-
second.
Just defeat it.
The mover is debating and recommending defeat, so you could put that, you could call the question.
All righty, we'll call the question. All those opposed?
So everyone is opposed?
I don't, yes.
Well, enough are opposed.
Well,
I think
I
I'd
need
like to
names.
know.
Oh, you need to know. All right, put your hands up if you're opposed. Mike's asleep. Although he's not.
No, Mike gave me a clear indication that he was opposed. to
Director
this.
Richards opposed,
I'm
Director
seeing
Jewett's opposed,
100% opposition.
100%. I don't see Director Jewett opposed. Okay, thank you. Everyone's opposed. Thank you.
Thank you all for your cooperation.
I can't believe how difficult this thing is.
Item 7.2, Northern Economic Development Initiatives Committee meeting recommendations of May 9th. I think this is straightforward too.
I have to
So,
declare a
Demare.
conflict of interest.
Yes, you would like to. Director Demare.
As my daughter is a paid employee and of the RC, and my wife is a director on the board.
Right. You're stepping up.
You don't, oh, you don't have to close.
I don't have to close it.
You don't. No.
All right.
Too late. We can open that. Thanks.
Request for decision 2020. Rural Community Development Grants.
Yeah.
Yes. So, yeah. Is Jeanette coming? No, Patricia's here to speak to this one. Thank you, that would be terrific.
Good afternoon, everyone. Patricia Westerholm, Communications and Engagement Manager with the SLRD. Excuse me. Here today in regard to the request for decision on the 2020 BC Rural Community Development Grants for electoral areas A and B. And this item has been moved forward from the Northern Economic Development and Initiatives Committee meeting of May 19th and requests a decision from the board on returning 2 grants for electoral areas A and B. There is an information report in your package, some additional information, but by way of background, these were 2 grants that we had initially applied for in 2019 through the former BC Rural Dividend Program, and they were based on the then electoral area director priorities of the time. And shortly after we submitted those requests, we were advised that the Rural Dividend Program had been suspended and that no applications would be considered from that stream. And then in 2020, in response to the pandemic, we were contacted by the province and advised that they were moving forward with offering some of those grant projects that had been applied through the rural dividend stream to rural communities where there may be an economic development potential. So they offered us those grants and we accepted them at the time. Following a report to the board. And since that time, the priorities have shifted somewhat. There have been some new developments. This work has to be done by the end of 2023, and we were not able to move away from the original scope of the projects that were applied for in 2019. So that's some time ago now, and not ever wanted to turn away money. It was a bit of a challenge, but the scope of the projects just really don't align now with what we could do. And for example, the projects were developing a business plan for the Hillmore heritage site in Area A and development of a heritage protocol in Area B. And with that Area B project, we have learned that the Papatla Council has developed a heritage policy. And staff is working with their team right now to find a way to present that to the board and to staff and work with them on that moving forward. So that project doesn't seem mindful to move forward with our own project at this time. And with regard to the business plan for the Hillmore Heritage Site, the Bridge River Valley Community Association's Heritage Committee has advised us that while they still view that as an important project, it doesn't align with their priorities for the time being. So the request, excuse me, for decision is on returning these 2 grants and removing those from staff work plans. And if anyone has any questions, I will try and answer those.
That was very informative. Thank you.
Can
I move then?
Yes, please.
I'll move.
Right. That's moved by Director Rainbow and seconded by Director Mack. Anyone opposed? Not seeing any. Thank you. And it's kind of good news on both fronts that we're returning those funds because good things have happened in both communities. So thank you very much for your work. We're on to item number 8, bylaws, 8.1, Birkenhead Estates zoning amendment.
Ms. Needham, who needs to be admitted for this?
I can speak to this application.
The Birkenhead? Yes. Yes, please.
Come and sit in good seats.
Okay.
Or the cheap
Yes,
seats,
so
we're
this
not sure.
application has been before the board previously. At this point, we're requesting that 3rd reading be given and that the bylaw be referred to MOTI, Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, for approval prior to adoption.
Moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Demare. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, the motion is carried. The next one is on Lillooet Lake Estates and Heather Jean Properties. 3.2. Would you like to say something about that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this application is for providing zoning to the Lillooet Lake Estates and Heather Jean Properties site, which is located on Lillooet Lake. This again has been to the board previously for first reading. We're requesting that the bylaw now have a second reading. And in the resolutions, it does say that the public hearing be waived, but we're now recommending that the public hearing be held and that Director Mack be appointed as the chair with Director Ford as alternate.
Okay, thank you. So the third that is changed, that there will be a public hearing and Director Mack will attend with Chair Ford as an alternate.
Yes, Chair, and I have provided the Director of Administration with the appropriate wording for that
That's
resolution.
probably in my new agenda. All right?
No.
Not yet, okay.
No.
It's not there yet. It's even newer than that. That sounds like a very good idea, though. Director Mack is moving that.
Can I just ask for just a bit of clarification here?
No.
So, I already know the answer, but everybody should. So in the first edition of this, we were not allowing any, or in the original land use contract, there were a certain number of lots that were zoned as commercial uses or for commercial uses, which included a lot of things that are like out of the question, movie theaters and on and on and on. So I've had concerns from some of the owners. I think there's 7 lots that have these designations. And I've had concerns from those people. They want to retain their commercial zoning when we go to this new format. So in consultation with the administrator and with Kim, we've come up with a plan that those 7 lots will be allowed to keep their commercial designation, but only for one, what is 1,000 square foot?
It's for lot 73.
Like a corner store.
Lot 73 to have 100 square meter retail store.
Okay, yeah. So that, that would, I think actually, so the 7, you know, in my mind, maybe the 7 should be given that option, but only one of them could qualify. How does that sound? So there's 7 of them that have that designation. And the first one that puts in their application to build a store, then that eliminates the other 6. Because as we've talked, there's no way you're gonna build 6 corner stores in that location. There's only enough, say with Strawberry Point, it's probably gonna be maybe your biggest customer for so many months of the year. But I don't think we should give lot 73 that option and eliminate the other 6, because in fact, all 6 have the same designation. So give the 7 of them that option, but only one will qualify. And I, like you say, there's no way you're gonna have 7 people put in for the same thing, because it's feasibly not possible. What do you think? I mean, I don't know if that's worded right or whatever, but.
Yeah, through the chair, I mean, we have been working with well, they're not applicants, this is an SLRD initiated change. But we've been dealing with the representatives of Heather Jean Properties and Lillooet Lake Estates, and they came forward and suggested that it was only the owner of lot 73 who wanted to retain their commercial designation. Therefore, the bylaw was crafted to only leave commercial on that particular property in a very
minimal way because of the
Yeah.
geotechnical concerns.
Okay, so that part of the conversation, I didn't realize had happened, so the people from Heather Jean and from Low Lake Estates, that was their recommendation?
Correct.
That only 73, okay, then I'm good with that,
All right.
fine and dandy.
Delighted.
And I'll move it.
Okay.
Second, I second.
No, you're too late. You're fifth, you fifth it.
Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, thank you very much. Motion carried. That's great. At 8.3, affordable housing amendments.
If we have Miss Mackay. Yeah.
Great. So Alex is coming in.
Just invite her in.
Okay. Welcome, Alex McGay,
Thank you.
about affordable housing amendments. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Through the chair. So I'm Alex Mackay, planner at the SLRD. Hopefully I'll keep my voice through the presentation. If not, Director Needham will jump in to cover off. So Bylaw 1679-2020 was last before the board in March. At that time, the bylaw as previously written was given second reading and we waived the public hearing. Following that, during the public hearing waiver process, we had a number of comments come in from members of the public, essentially concerned with the fact that the bylaw as previously written, which would allow for up to 2 auxiliary dwelling units, I should say 2 additional dwelling units, so 1 auxiliary dwelling unit in a carriage home, and when in the principal residence in the CD1 zone at Wedgwood Estates would effectively reduce the principal residence size by up to 180 square meters. So each of those additional dwelling units would reduce the principal residence size. And the concern there is that this bylaw is really intended to increase the amount of affordable housing being provided for. That is long-term rental housing that is covenanted. And with the bylaw as previously written, that was actually creating a disincentive for property owners to move forward with that, with the 2 additional dwelling units, because it would have such a substantial impact on the principal residence. So we've gone back and amended the bylaw. And what staff are recommending now is that for property owners that do decide to move forward with building both of those long-term covenanted rental units, they would in fact have a bit of a density bonus. So their principal residence could be increased by up to 90 square meters. Basically, that means that that's not, that both of those rental units are not having an impact on the size of the principal residence. So it creates a kind of a twofold incentive to create these long-term rental units. The first being that you get increased rental income, obviously, from having the 2 units. And the second being that they do get that opportunity to build a potentially larger home on their estate property in the CD1 zone. And I will just mention that this amendment would impact density, proposed density. So if it goes forward, we would have to do a second public hearing waiver. I think I'll leave it there and open it up to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Matt?
No, I'll move this. So we're rescinding
Hold on. I sort of jumped there too fast. I didn't realize Director Rainbow had a question and Director Pettingill.
Okay, go ahead.
And you do too.
So first question. So if somebody has a principal residence, they can now put 2 carriage homes on their property? Am I reading that, understanding that properly?
So through the chair, the intent of the bylaw is to allow for up to 2 additional long-term rental units. 1 would need to be in the principal residence, so it would need to be a secondary suite, and 1 could be in a carriage home. So currently, you are only allowed in the CD1 zone to have 1 of those 2. You could elect to have it in your carriage home. You could elect to have that dwelling unit in your principal residence, but you can't have 2. So this is intended to increase the amount of long-term rental in the region based on some recommendations that came from the housing need and demand study.
So my question now is that if somebody came to us and said that I don't want to build a big principal residence and a carriage home. What I'd like to build is 4 cottages, which will equal in total square feet what a big home and a small home would equal. Could they do that, or how could they do that?
Thank you. So through the chair, our zoning bylaw does not presently allow for that, and that's not contemplated as part of this amendment. This amendment would only allow for property owners to make that decision to build one in the principal residence and one in the carriage home. They couldn't build multiple residential dwelling units on their property.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I understand. With no suite, no auxiliary dwelling or anything, I can build to a certain size. Previously, if I added a suite or an auxiliary dwelling unit, then my principal residence would shrink. Now, if I do those, I get a density bonus. Does that take me back up to what my single family home would be with no suites, or can I go even bigger than the original starting point because I've got these suites?
Right. So as you stated, currently, if you only build one of those additional dwelling units, it is deducted from your maximum gross floor area for your principal residence. This would allow you to go larger. So we don't, those current units are not covenanted. We don't have any sort of mechanism in place to ensure that ensure that they're being used for long-term rental, whereas these would be covenanted. So it's a density bonus intended to increase uptake of those covenanted long-term rental units. So you could, yes, as you stated, you could go up to 90 square meters. So 900 square feet, it's not an enormous addition, but you could have up to 900 additional square feet as part of your principal residence. Staff feel that on these, they're large scale estate lots in Wedgwood's estates. There is enough space to contemplate this type of additional density.
And so, sorry, I'm still not clear though, the increase in size of the primary residence, does that take me back up to where I would be originally with no suites, or could I go even bigger than what it was before?
So in this case, it's an additional 90 square meters. So it's 90 square meters beyond what would be allowed for otherwise in the zoning bylaw. Thank you.
I have Director Mack, then Director Compton, then Director Jewett.
No, go ahead.
Director Compton
My question was answered. Thanks.
and Director Jewett.
Thank you. So just looking up, currently the allowable is 4629 square feet. Sorry, I'm an old fashioned girl, on lots less than 1 acre, and up to 5,920 square feet on lots more than 1 acre plus an auxiliary building. So it already allowed the auxiliary building on top of the almost 6,000 square feet. So they would be granted another 1,000 square feet, which is what 90 square meters pretty much adds up to. So you'd be looking at a home of about 7,000 square feet on above 1 acre, and a home of about 5,500 square feet on less than 1 acre. My feeling, I have a problem with the size of these, considering they also don't have a fire department. This is a lot of building. I do agree that we need affordable housing, but I'm not sure how well this will deliver it and what the covenants will be to ensure that the people in those rental suites are people that need it, and they are indeed affordable.
Thank you through the chair. Perhaps CAO Dalton can speak to the fire service piece. I believe that there has been an agreement, or that there is an agreement in place now to address that issue with regard to fire servicing for.
I'm aware of that.
Okay.
Because that's something that had to be passed by Worcester Council,
right? Because
currently they rely on the Worcester Fire Rescue Service.
Yes. So to the other parts of your question. With respect to the size, it's certainly something we could look at. Another way this could be done is that it could be a partial density bonus. So we could look at increasing it by 60 square meters or something to that effect, as opposed to the full 90. And I'm sorry, Director Jewett, there was a third portion of your question, or third component?
The covenant, just
Right.
wondering how the covenant would assure that it's people, first of all, that should qualify for affordable housing. Are these employees somewhere, either in Pemberton or in Whistler? And how will it be affordable? So what will be the rental rate per square foot?
Okay, so currently the covenants that are contemplated, we haven't kind of fleshed them out in great detail, but what is intended is that you need to be an employee of the region. So you could work somewhere in the electoral areas or in one of the member municipalities, or people that have retired from working in the region. Or thirdly, you could rent long-term to a family member. So that's what we were intending to provide for. To the affordability piece, that's not something that is currently contemplated, pinning it down to a specific number, but that's certainly something that we could take a look at doing.
Right, and who would administer the oversight on this?
It would be the SLRD. Certainly, it's something we could potentially, I think because this is relatively small in scale, it would be the SLRD. For other projects, sometimes there can be partnership arrangements agreed to with the WHA, but that's entirely dependent on their interest in pursuing that partnership.
Great, thank you for putting some attention on this, this important topic.
I have Director Richmond, I believe, and Director Mack and Director Rainbow.
Couple quick questions and then a comment. And you might not be able to answer the first, but when you're going south, that very large house that sits right up there, and you know which one I'm talking about. Do you have an idea how many square feet that is?
I don't know exactly. I'm gonna guess it's around 5,000.
Because that's a monster home, and we're looking at, to Councillor's, Director Jewett's point, adding another 1,000 or 2,000 square feet to that sort of building plus a carriage house. That's really big, but yeah, actually, sorry, I'm already into my comments. My other question is, some of the building permits that have come forward, is there an appetite from these homeowners to have homes over 5,000 square feet? Is this something that's come to staff, or if we're trying to provide an incentive here to provide long-term rentals, is this incentive something that's actually in demand? Or are people actually saying, hey, I want to build a 7,000 square foot house? Like, is that something that's come up?
We should direct that to Ms. McCall.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm happy to speak to that. I can't speak to the building permit piece per se, but I can say that as part of the public hearing waiver process, we do connect when it's a zoning amendment that's specifically for the CD1 zone. The members of the public that we specifically reached out to beyond the other notification requirements are the Wedgwood Strata Council. And we did hear from members of the public that people that do own property in Wedgwoods, that there were concerns around whether there would be uptake, whether they would be interested in participating in this and building the 2 dwelling units if it did, in fact, impact their principal residence by up to 180 square meters. So it's coming directly out of conversations that we had there.
Okay, thanks for that. I mean, my comments, my thoughts are similar to Kathy's. I worry that 7,000 square feet, man, those are big buildings. That's not a home anymore. But perhaps there's a market for it and perhaps there's a need for it. I don't know. I totally support finding some incentives to help supply long-term rentals, and I'm happy to see 2 long-term rentals available per property. I think the carriage house is a good idea, and one of the principal residents. I'm just similarly thinking that this is to offer this incentive so that they can go up to 7,000 feet. I don't know if that's the best route to go. I'm interested to hear everybody else's comments here, but that seems pretty monster to me. I'm not going to lie. So yeah, I get the intent, and I'm for the intent, and I want to see the housing provided, and staff's answered, and Alex answered the question as well in terms of how it's going to get managed and all that. So I'm happy with all that. I just 7,000 square feet seems pretty crazy.
Director Needham, did you want to comment on
Yeah,
that?
I'll just speak to the density issue. So the particular house that you're speaking to, I think perhaps the articulation of that massing isn't ideal, and it's set in this sort of, it's set on a point. So I think the massing looks large. These are big lots. I think everybody has to bear that in mind. They're very big lots. A lot of them have gradation, so they're not necessarily flat lots. So I think the massing is going to appear to be less. Yet we already do allow for a carriage house that's connected with a garage as well as a main residence. So it's essentially about 1,000 square feet more that we would be allowing for. I think that amount of density really doesn't make a big difference on a big lot like that. And I think, you know, within the SLRD, we really don't have a lot of places for this kind of infill housing to allow for affordability. And we feel that unless we allow some sort of small density bonus, we're not going to get a lot of uptake on this sort of program to allow people to build these extra units. So that's sort of the rationale is to try and get some uptake on this, and that we find that, well, I guess we'll find out, but if we do allow a little bit of a density bonus, I think it's probably going to push people a little bit more to actually take us up on this proposal.
Director Matt, Rainbow, Crompton, Stoner, Pettingill, and Sam. Go ahead, Russell.
Yeah, I'm fully supportive of this because of the size of the area, the lot, and the lay of the land. I mean, there's a lot of rock, and there's no flat spaces really unless you make them. But the other question was fire service. Area C contracts fire service from the village of Pemberton, and they travel further than the fire service that is being supplied by Whistler, and we have great service from Pemberton, and we've had it for many years, and I'm sure we're going to have it for many more. So having a contracted fire service is there's nothing wrong with it, shall we say. And with the way the heating systems are in houses, I think houses today are a lot more fire smart than they used to be. Some people put their own sprinkler systems in. So anyways, I think that is a very well protected area when you consider what they've got. So anyways, I'm fully supportive of getting that extra housing, because we have zero housing available, as we all know, trying to hire staff, the village, everybody. It's critical that we get more housing. Thank you.
Director Crompton. Sorry, Director Rainbow.
Just
And then Director Crompton.
just a question for Alex. One of the bullets says CD1 zone, and then Wedgwood Estates in brackets. And then further down it says this amendment only impacts area C. Now, does that mean it impacts area C other than Wedgwoods?
No, through the chair, it does not. It only applies to the CD1 zone.
Okay.
For clarity, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I think that the goal of drawing more interest in employee housing is a good one. It seems to me that the proposal is that the way we're choosing to do that is through density bonusing. I do think there are other ways that we could draw people into building more employee housing. I think one of the benefits of this is that there's revenue for owners as a result. And have forgotten what I was going to say. Shoot. Right, well, if I remember, I'll put my name back on the list. That'll be,
Okay.
I will appreciate that, I'm sure.
Crossing you off. Jenna.
Thank you, through the chair. My first question is just a point of clarity. So we are allowing additional square footage, but does it change the lot coverage that's allowable? Or does that like value of lot coverage stay the same? So you can like build a taller building, but you can't build a larger footprint building? Or does the lot coverage also change in this proposal?
Sorry, I just muted myself. Thank you, through the chair. So at present, we haven't made any changes to the lot coverage provisions for CD1.
Okay, that's helpful. And then my other question was, I too agree with the intent, and I think density bonusing can be a really powerful tool to get us to providing alternative and more forms of housing. In the district of Squamish, when we brought in our low carbon incentive program, we actually did a reductive, like a reductive density bonus. So we actually just reduced the ability to, like, for all of our residential areas, we reduced the buildable area by a third. And if you wanted to get back to your full buildable area, you had to provide low carbon energy sources for that building. And I'm just curious if that sort of approach to density bonusing had been considered by staff in this model, given the size of the allowable buildable area anyways.
Thank you. So through the chair, do I understand correctly that you're saying that you're proposing something where the allowable maximum gross floor area would be reduced across the entire CD1 zone unless there was uptake? Yeah, I think in this particular case, it's a challenge. It would be a challenge to implement something like that because there are so many properties that are already built out that already have that existing principal residence and carriage home on them. I think that if we're starting with a new development proposal, that's something that could be contemplated, but that's not something that we've contemplated as part of this amendment. Thank you.
Director Pettingill, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. As it stands right now, if you did an accessory dwelling unit, you could still build the principal residence to full size. It's when that second suite came in that your principal residence has to shrink a bit under the current bylaw. Is that correct?
Thank you. So through the chair, the current bylaw only allows for one additional dwelling unit. So that can be your suite in the single family home or it can be in a carriage home. In either case, if it's in the single family home, the size of that suite is subtracted from, like it is included in that calculation for the size of the principal residence. So in effect, it's subtracted from the main dwelling unit area. If it's in the carriage home, it is also subtracted. So if you build 80 square meters, an 80 square meter suite in the carriage home, the size of your principal residence is reduced by the size of that suite. So it would be reduced by 80 square meters in that case. Does that clarify? So if it's in the home, it counts toward your overall gross floor area. So it would in effect also be subtracted. And that's in a case where you're building one unit.
And do we have any, like, I think in many instances, there's an attempt to mix in the affordable housing and the rental housing with non-affordable housing. But the units, it seems, are generally similar sized and sort of very, very similar, and there's a clear mix. Whereas here, I'm just wondering if there's any sort of evidence or research that, when you have 5,000, 6,000 square foot homes, it just doesn't work to have a very small affordable dwelling next door. Like that's too disparate a mix for it to work well. Or do we know that sort of mix does work generally?
Through the chair. So I would say in this particular case, in this neighborhood, it's certainly a mix that can work. There are a large number of properties where they have elected to build either a secondary suite in the principal residence or a carriage home, even under the existing zoning. So I would see there being certainly some uptake, and that's definitely the feedback that we did get from that outreach effort as part of the public hearing waiver, that there is interest in this approach and having those two additional dwelling units. And it does also increase, I mean, the affordability piece is kind of twofold, right? You're allowing for long-term rental that's covenanted. So it is long-term, in fact, it's utilized in that way. But the second piece is that for property owners, you can move forward and have potentially 2 additional dwelling unit incomes to count toward your mortgage. So it does make those purchases more affordable as well. So both the rental piece and the for purchase piece.
Okay, and is there a reason why to make this work, we didn't just say, hey, if you do a second suite or dwelling, you don't lose any buildable size on your primary residence, but it doesn't get bigger. You just don't lose any like you do now. And is there a reason why that wasn't considered?
So I think in the previous iteration, both of them would have been subtracted from the principal residence. So no, it hasn't been considered, but that was what I was alluding to earlier, is that we could look at reducing the size of that density bonus and not go to the full floor area of the suite or auxiliary dwelling unit.
Director Needham, I think you had something to add.
Yeah, I'll just speak to that last point that Director Pettingill raised. And, the city of Vancouver has just changed their policy to allow laneway homes. So I think there is good proof out there that having a larger home beside a smaller, carriage house is a workable solution. And there's been a lot of uptake in the city of Vancouver on that program. I just wanted to add as well that all of the houses in Wedgwoods are required to be sprinklered. So just to the whole fire issue, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Director Demare?
Yeah, I've got a question for you, Ms. McKay. The square footage is just the surface area on the ground, and they're allowed 2 stories, right? So or is that combined lower floor and upper floor?
Yeah, so thank you through the chair. The gross floor area does include all of the, I'd have to pull up the definition from the specific zoning bylaw, but it includes both floors. It's typically all of the floor area within the building envelope and enclosure. And sometimes there's exceptions such as basements or things like that, or porches, patios. So I'd have to pull up the definition, but it's most of the area within the building envelope would count.
So like that big building that's on that everybody sees on the road there, if it's a 5,000, 6,000 square foot building, then it's basically, the footprint is 3,000 square feet. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, when we talk about big buildings, you got to take that into consideration. So if they're going to take away 1,000 square feet out of the lower level to have a suite or upstairs or whatever they're going to do, then, it definitely isn't an incentive to do that, to create more housing. So I'll approve that once it gets to the motion.
Have one more hand here, Director Jewett.
Thanks so much. Just wondering, I have a couple of questions. Are there any bylaws or covenants not allowing Airbnb or short-term rentals in that neighborhood? You're muted.
Through the chair, I was just trying to mute my coughing. Through the chair, the existing zoning bylaw does have a provision in there that makes it clear that short-term rentals are prohibited unless they're permitted by way of a temporary use permit or other mechanism. But across the board, short-term rentals are not unallowed use or permitted use in the CD1 zone.
Okay, so that would mean that current suites would not be allowed to be Airbnb or short-term rental unless they have a TUP.
That is correct, yes, but they're not covenanted. So
okay.
They're meant to comply with the zoning bylaw, but there isn't a covenant on title.
Are there any TUPs currently in Wedgwoods?
sorry, through the chair, not to the best of my knowledge, but I'll let Director Needham jump in if there are any she's aware of.
Yeah, through the chair, there are no TUPs. There is an allowed pension. One lot is a pension, and that did go through the board. But yeah, there is no nightly rentals allowed. And the benefit of this program would be that we would have covenants on the suites where we don't now. So it just gives us a little bit of extra power in terms of enforcement.
Okay, and my final question is regarding rental rates. So the request for decision is about affordable housing amendments. What is affordable housing and how is that defined? The way that it's defined by the WHA is 30% of your gross income. And when you're building these houses are probably getting built for, I'm going to say, we're building WHA units right now for about $515 a square foot. So I'm going to say these are $700 to $1,000 a square foot. So you're going to be looking at rentals potentially double what we see in WHA if you're going to try to do cost recovery. Just wondering how we get the affordability in there.
Thank you. Oh.
Was wanting to answer that?
Yeah, well, if I may, Chair, this is really probably more of an employee housing and retiree housing scheme than an affordable housing scheme. So we haven't anticipated having rent limits in the covenants. What we found is that there's just a need across the board for employees within the region for housing. And with the rental rates being as they are, even high income earners are struggling with the rental situation. So we feel that by having covenants that limit the use to employees, retirees, and family members, we will effectively keep the price of the rentals to a reasonable rate. It would be a market driven sort of price.
Okay, thank you. And they probably do something similar to WHA where you do an annual declaration of who's in there.
Through the chair, we haven't recommended a stat deck, but we could.
Okay, thank you.
And okay.
Okay, thank you through the chair. I just wanted to add a couple 2 points of clarity. So initially the stat deck wasn't contemplated, but it is actually contemplated in the bylaw as presently written. So we would require confirmation on an annual basis to the Director of Planning and Development Services, confirming the occupancy of those units. The second point of clarity is I just want to go back to Director Pettengill's earlier question, which was about whether or not we contemplated only allowing it, only going up to the existing maximum gross floor area. So the bylaw as it's written and is presented before you today would allow the GFA of the principal residence to be increased by 90 square meters. But what that does mean is that the dwelling unit, the secondary suite that's in the principal residence, counts toward that overall GFA. So we're not increasing by 180 square meters, if that makes sense. It is essentially bringing it back to, say, let's just say you're allowed 400 square meters, which can include a suite. If it included a suite, you'd deduct 90 square meters, so you'd be at 310. Instead, now you'll be allowed up to 400 plus the suite. So it's just not having the suite impact on that GFA. I don't know if that completely clarifies it, but essentially we're not adding on the amount for both of these additional dwelling units. We're just contemplating that 90 to accommodate for that. Thank you.
Director Mack.
Well, I was going to move this, but we're still talking, so.
Yeah, and I have Director Richmond, Pettingill, and Rainbow.
So I know this is going on, but I think we all want to get it right. So I do, like I said earlier, I struggle a little bit with the idea of that big a home, but I'm willing to put those struggles aside for the purpose of getting more employee housing. I can wrap my head around that, I think. But I would like to, I would do so to that 1,000 square feet as opposed to the 2,000 square feet additional. I'm more comfortable with making it to 6,000 square feet rather than 7. It sounds like the deck answer was one of the other concerns I had. That ensures us as the process that we have the ability to make sure that these suites are not being used for anything but employee housing. Do we have it, in other words, 2 years from now, somebody puts one in, do we have an opportunity to follow up? I don't want to see us building 6,000 square foot homes and the employee suites become family guest rooms and after a couple of years. In other words, I want some sort of security that these suites remain in the rental market. Some sort of guarantee that we can keep these suites in the rental market. That would make me feel more comfortable. And I'm a little bit reluctant in terms of Ms. Needham's response to capping the rent and that we need higher end rental units as well. I agree. It's going to be, the homes that are getting built, there are high end homes. And if our intent with this plan is to supply employee housing, I want to make sure, I think that there should be some sort of rental cap within the covenant or agreement to make sure that they can't rent out a 1-bedroom suite for $4,500. That will not help our rental or our housing crisis right now. If the idea behind this is to have incentive to supply employee housing, then I want to make sure that employee housing is secured for a number of years ahead and is rent controlled to a certain degree as well. And if we can do that, then I'm happy to move ahead with it.
Okay, so there's a few changes here that are coming into play for staff to consider. Director Pettingill.
Yeah, thanks. Just want to make sure I understand the process. If there are things we're concerned about as is, this gets moved as is and then defeated because of those concerns, then we're kind of stuck for 6 months before we can take another crack. But if someone refers this back to staff and that's supported, then we can work these out and it can come back much quicker. Is that sort of understanding the process correct?
I think so.
Through the chair, the 6-month issue is it's not an issue in this case because this is a staff initiated change to the zoning. It's not an application from an applicant. So I guess if the board wishes us to make a change and come back with a recommendation of, say, a maximum price per square foot for these rentals that would go into a covenant, that would just mean that we could come back next month with this.
And reducing the amount that the primary residence could be expanded as suggested by Directors Jewett and the statutory declaration. Those things that could be incorporated?
Any changes could be incorporated for next month.
Okay.
So I'd like to make a motion to have staff come back with some considerations for rent controls for ensuring that the units stay within the rental market. So some sort of security around that within the covenant and bring that back at the next board meeting.
I'm not sure that we can actually have an obligation on owners that would force them to rent. We'll have to check with our lawyers on that, but I think we can have covenants that say that if they rent, then these are the requirements. But I'm not sure if we can force that, but we'll check and come back.
Some security around there if we could.
Right. And Director Pettingill, your hands down now. I have Director Rainbow. Is that good?
Well, I was going to speak in support of this, and I was going to second Russell's motion, but that seems to be sidelined at the moment. I'll just make this comment. We desperately need more housing throughout this area. There's not a one solution that is going to solve the problem from Darcy down to Lions Bay. And we've got to look at each area separately. This particular development is kind of unique. It's not, I can't think of another area around it that is quite like it. And I think we're getting into a level of complexity that we don't need to get into. I like what staff have brought forward. If we increase the number of smaller homes in there, the 90 square foot carriage houses that were available, then that's more housing that is available, that relieves pressure. I don't know where we're at the moment. As I say, I was going to second Russell's motion, but I guess that's all I have to say.
We'll hear
Thank you.
from Director Jewett and Director Richmond, please.
Thank you so much for your patience. I could not agree more that we need housing. We absolutely are desperate for housing. But what we're seeing here in Whistler is that people with deep pockets find a way to get around the covenants, and the covenants are where the magic happens. And if we're going to allow this density, then we need to be assured that it's getting used for what we are intending it to be used for. And so we can't just grant people extra space and then what we're seeing is, oh, my son's coming home from university. He couldn't possibly fit in my 6,000 square foot home. He needs to live in the suite. And so, and I'm sorry, we have a family with children that got kicked out of a covenanted unit on Timebridge for that very same reason. And so, and then we had another member buy it out of the covenant. I mean, we're looking at people here that have a lot of money. And so we want to be sure that when we're doing this move, that our intentions are followed through and that the unintended doesn't happen.
Thank you, Director Richmond.
Yeah, not much to add to that. That's where I was going. It's our responsibility. We need housing. Nobody's denying that. We're going to try to get there. But I don't think that means we have to rush and approve things without doing all of our due diligence and all of our considerations. Sometimes it takes long, and here we are still talking about it. But we want to make sure that these rental units are there as long as they can be for the purpose that we've created them. These are $3, $4, $5 million homes that are going up. They can afford to make sure that we're doing this right. They want rental suites, then let's do it right. So totally agree. We need rental housing. I don't want to sign off on something that 5 years from now, people are looking at going, yeah, that's great. Bunch of rich people over there, they get whatever they want. So I want to make sure we're well protected. And I think we're going down that route. And so I'm pleased with the direction we're going.
So are we going to make these changes, or are we going to ask staff?
Motion to have staff bring back some suggestions around potential rent control and keeping them within the inventory.
If questions are done, what you might do is put that motion on the table, debate that motion, and call the question.
Excuse me, Jack is in the waiting room. Could someone let him in, please?
And also I see Director Pettingill's hand up again, or is that still up?
Yeah, no, it's up. I don't know if someone has seconded the motion, so I was going to second it and speak to it when it's my turn.
Okay, so hold on, because I'm getting out of process.
A suggestion is, I have that, what has been, because we would have to do the first that on its own because it's rescinding the reading, I have that moved. So I think we can still rescind the second reading. And then we could finish that one. If that was seconded, we could carry. And then we could look at wording that Director Richmond has suggested for bringing this back. So that's one way forward.
All right.
I'll move rescind.
Second.
No, second, sorry.
I already moved it.
I don't, okay.
It's like a half an hour ago.
The whole thing, I moved it to.
You moved rescinding second reading, and Barb just seconded it. Does anyone opposed to that? Seeing none, that second reading is rescinded. Now, Director Richmond, you're going to
A motion
suggest.
to have staff come back with some suggestions for rent controls and ensuring that the rental units remain rental units for the years to come. Is that clear enough?
Second. Seconded by Director Reed. Are there any objections, Director Pettingill?
Yeah, I was just, given some of the conversation, going to test also the comment that we look at incentives that don't involve expanding the primary residence. So some language around that, so you don't end up with a 45 square foot suite and another 45 square feet or square meters, I should say, on the primary residence. So, you know, you don't lose space on your primary residence maybe, but they don't grow even bigger than they are now.
Okay, Director Matt?
We're gonna make this thing so onerous, people aren't gonna buy into it. So let's just leave it at what Director Richmond has said, and let's go on with it.
Okay, so I don't think that I have an interest in following up on that here at this meeting right now. Okay.
Let's call a question.
Call the question then. And anyone opposed to that motion? No one is opposed. All right, that motion is carried. Very important. Director Stoner has.
Comment?
1 second. There, okay, yes. Director Stoner, please go ahead.
I was just going to suggest through the chair to my colleague, Director Pettingill, that if you wanted to test a motion on that other item separate, it may be worth getting the board's temperature on it.
Sure. Yep.
But I would suggest it be a separate motion.
Would you like to do that, Chris?
I felt like I got a read of the room just there. I didn't feel like there was support, so I think I'll leave it to someone else if someone else wants to do it, but I won't. Thank you.
It might be exhaustion on that particular topic. Although, okay.
Can I make a comment, please?
Yes.
I find this very frustrating, to be honest. We had a proposal, I can't remember now, 1.5 years, 2 years ago, to put a whole bunch of affordable rental units and affordable market housing on the other side of the street, the highway, and we turned it down. That was the opportunity that we should have taken.
We're not changing that right now, though.
No,
Let's maybe save that.
I can't make a comment?
I can make a comment.
Why can't I make a comment?
Okay. Seems a little off topic for the agenda that I'm desperately trying to get through here.
Well, I'm just making a comment, and we're making this one just as hard. That's it.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't want to drag this on, but I have to defend the position. We're not trying to make it complicated. We're trying to make it clear and secure so that when we do provide affordable employment housing, we do it properly and we do it for the long term.
Yeah.
We're just trying to do this right. This is not complicated. When we put the covenant together, this is nothing new. WHA has 1 million covenants. Communities all over the place have 1 million covenants in different ways to manage affordable housing. We're being told that our corridor is suffering a crisis of affordable housing. We're trying to solve it in a way that will be permanent and long-term and well thought out. I'm not trying to stop this. This is a totally different project than what was proposed a year or so ago. And I'm not trying to stop this. I want to make sure that we do it and we hit the intention that we're trying to hit. I'm not trying to slow it down. I want to make sure that 5 years from now, these rental units in these monster homes that we're approving are still rental units, and that people that need jobs and homes can access them. So this isn't a matter of trying to make it complicated or not allow for affordable housing in Wedgwoods. This is a completely different project. I support the intent, as I said from the very beginning. I just want to see it done right, and I want to see it done securely. I don't think this is anything, I'm sensing impatience that we're actually going through this process. I don't want to rubber stamp it and say, yeah, go ahead, developers. We believe that you're going to do this in the right intention all the way through. This is our job, is to make sure that the proper controls are in place. And I'll continue to do that job while trying to collectively solve this housing crisis that we're all suffering.
I think everyone should just take a stretch, and then we're gonna move on to a very important topic for agriculture and community.
Are you biased?
I know that you all want affordable housing.
You taking a 4-minute stretch or a 1-minute stretch or?
30 seconds, it's
30
over.
seconds stretch, okay, that's fine.
Pilates time.
But I think you should, yeah, take a chance to get your coffee or whatever.
Right. Oh, it's nice actually. Yeah, I'll do that.
We'll we
Ask
have
everybody to
Melanie
have time.
beam in for the 3.4? I think we will.
Yes.
Maybe. Ms. Hillmore will be talking about this one.
Chair, I believe that's Ms. McKay again.
Oh, okay. That's great.
Well, that's the zoning, it's not the,
Because I'm moving,
it's
yeah.
not the service attachment.
Am I having to move to the new agenda? Is that what I'm missing?
No, it's a zoning amendment bylaw. agricultural zoning.
8.4. Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's not the service establishment law.
not yet. No, right. And I see Mr. Kai here to speak to this one. Yes, okay, good. Your voice is getting better the longer we keep you on.
Thank you. So through the chair, I'm just going to give a very brief update on this one because this was previously brought forward to the board in March with a really detailed table of proposed amendments. But Zoning Amendment Bylaw 1752/2022 will apply to electoral area B, and this is specifically addressing the need for agricultural zoning updates in electoral area B. So it's quite a substantial number of amendments to the existing zoning bylaw to allow, basically to bring that into alignment with the Agricultural Land Commission Act, the ALR regulations, and then also to incorporate some discretionary changes that were supported both by the Agricultural Advisory Committee and by the board at the March meeting. So I won't go through, as I said, the individual amendments at this point in time, although they are all highlighted for convenience in Schedule A, which was appended to the report. I do want to quickly note, so on page 3 of the report, when we were preparing the zoning for this the mapping for this zoning amendment, it did come to our attention that there are 5 parcels in the existing R1 zone that also have a portion of their land base in the ALR. So those are also being contemplated for the split zoning. And what we're looking to do is bring in 4, so we previously had proposed 3 different distinct agricultural zones, AGR 1 through 3. Now we're proposing AGR 1 through 4. And the reason for that is to ensure that any existing permitted uses in those RR 1, 2, 3, and R1 zones, where they are compatible with the provincial regulatory framework, that those are being maintained. So that would include the minimum parcel sizes for new subdivision. And I'll just say quickly, so in terms of next steps, if the bylaw as written is given first reading today, staff will initiate the referrals process. And as part of the referrals process, we will be bringing the bylaw as it's presently written back to the Agricultural Advisory Committee in early June for review and comment. So I'll leave it there and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Are there questions? Having been involved with this as Area B, I recognize the staff for a massive amount of work and back and forth with our AAC and so forth. I'd like to move this. Seconded by Director Mack. Anyone? Director Pettingill, yes.
Yeah, sorry, one line was counterintuitive to me. I just wonder if staff can explain this. Farm status is not being required for secondary farm residences, which seems contradictory. I'm just wondering if staff can explain that.
Yeah, absolutely. Through the chair, I'm happy to speak to that. So in the report that came forward at the end of March, there were 2 recommendations. So we had presented the staff recommendation and the Agricultural Advisory Committee recommendation. The staff recommendation at that point in time was to require farm status for the secondary farm residents. But based on discussion at the AAC table and the needs, kind of the unique local needs in Area B, it was not felt that that should be required in Area B. And so the direction of the board was to not require farm status based on that AAC recommendation. Thanks.
And I hope I didn't miss any other questions. No? Okay, I'll proceed with the motion. Is anyone opposed? Motion is carried. Now, 8.5 is still House Sound East and Electoral Area D.
Thanks, Alex.
Oh, thanks, Alice. Goodbye. Thanks. I see Claire is here. Okay, welcome. Development permit areas, 8.5, Area D. Please go ahead, Ms. Stewart.
Pardon me. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Claire Dewar. I'm a senior planner here at the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District. I will be speaking, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I'll be speaking to the House on East and Electoral Area D housekeeping amendments development permit areas, and they are being presented for adoption. Is that the correct item? I just got it.
It is.
Excellent, thank you. And so I'll just be really brief, as I know it's been a long afternoon here, but really I just wanted to touch on two changes. One was to do with two housekeeping revisions. Pardon me. A second here. So, sorry, pardon me. One was to do with two housekeeping revisions. They had to do with the...
Don't worry. We'll
sorry, it's after my time. Anyways, I'll keep it really brief. And what I'm trying to say is the two housekeeping revisions that are being voted. Please be quiet. The two housekeeping revisions that I'm speaking of here have to do with one was around the riparian protection development permit area exemptions, and this is language that was brought in recommended by our planning technician with regards to specific changes in area C, and then the other one was to do with changes for the wildfire protection.
You know what, Claire, we can jump to another topic and come back to you if you need to.
Sure, I can
take care of that little one.
I can speak to this one if you like, Chair.
And let, yeah. We've got Miss Needham here to cover you.
Thank you.
So there was one minor housekeeping revision made with respect to the riparian DPA exemptions. So basically it's to say that the regulation does not apply in relation to development that consists of repairs or alterations. And
hi, kiddo.
She doesn't know that she's not muted.
Okay, and so we also did a minor housekeeping revision to the wildfire DPA section to clarify that the zone 1 and 2 measures are to be implemented to the greatest extent possible, allowing for property owners to implement landscaping and tree spacing measures on their properties while acknowledging that the zones may not be implemented uniformly around the home as a result of the property lines, etc. So those are the changes made. So yeah, this has been a long effort by staff, and I commend Ms. Dewar for her extensive work on this bylaw. And yeah, it's ready for adoption as revised.
Oh, move it, yes, sorry.
Thank you. Moved by Director Rainbow, seconded by Director Mack. And is there opposition? Seeing none, the motion is passed. Please thank Claire. And that was kind of a different note in the meeting. I'll bring my pup next time.
I'll just echo Stephen's comments regarding the amount of work that went into this, the time it took. Well done, Claire.
Thanks to Ms. Dewar. All right.
Staff, I should say.
Staff.
I don't know who did it all, so.
8.6 is back to Area B with the Lillooet Camels Foot Television and Radio Rebroadcasting Service, and we have Ms. Hillmore here again. Please proceed, Melanie. I'd like to say a few words.
Thank you, Chair. Melanie Hillmore, Director of Strategic Initiatives, here to speak with you this time about the Lillooet Camel's Foot TV and Radio Rebroadcasting Service Amendment Bylaw that's before you today with a recommendation for first 3 readings. This is based on a request from the Pavilion Lake Property Owners Association and subsequent conversations between staff and that association, as well as the Lillooet Camel's Foot TV and Radio Association who provide this service. The SLRD provides funding on a contribution basis on tax dollars that are requisitioned for providing that rebroadcasting service. The particular property owners at Pavilion Lake are not able to receive the service because they're in the shadow of mountains that block the radio signal. And being a small society, there's no ability to improve that radio reception. This has been something that that society has attempted to do over the course of the years, and it just hasn't resulted in better service. So the options for doing an amendment to reduce the service area and change the boundaries would be either to get consent of 2/3 of the participants, which there being only 2 participants, Lillooet and Area B, both parties would have to consent, or going out for elector assent through voting, or having a petition to change the service. So the most efficient and cost-effective way to do that is to simply have the 2 parties consent, which would be done through the board authorizing the electoral area B director to consent, as well as having the District of Lillooet requested to consider this at an upcoming council meeting to provide their consent. From a financial perspective, the bylaw permits a maximum requisition of 15.4 cents per thousand as a mill rate, and the last year's taxation of 2021 was 5 cents per thousand. There's no tax rate, it's set at 0 for 2022 in order to enable staff to prepare this bylaw that's before you today and hopefully have this in place in time for the 2023 taxation year. From the perspective of the people who remain within the service, they will continue to receive the same service they've always received. The amount that they would pay will be marginally higher because of the 65 parcels that would be removed from the overall District of Lillooet and Area B service area. But exactly what that impact will be will depend on what the requisition level is for from the society, because they submit their requests every year to the Director of Finance, which is then considered by the Electoral Area B Director, the Director of Finance, and the board itself as part of our financial plan bylaw for the year. It would be less than 5% of what they're already paying, and on a $100,000 home, they were paying I think it was $5. So it's a very small percentage, pennies a year, as to what the difference would be on the change for a $100,000 home. If the bylaw is adopted, once we have consent, assuming that consent were to be provided by both the Electoral Area B Director and the District of Lillooet, it would be forwarded to the Inspector of Municipality for approval and then brought back to the board for consideration of adoption. happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Hillmore. Thank you for all your work on this. I'm looking for questions or hands.
Can we move all of that at once, Kristen, or do we need to separate them?
If we could do the first that, and then the rest can all be together.
I'll move the first one.
Thank you. So the motion is that we rescind that resolution, seconded by Mayor. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. And then there's the second two, three more of that, moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Demare. And anyone opposed? Seeing none, the motion is carried too. And I'm pleased about this progress. We are meeting with Tribal Council hopefully on June 3rd to give them an update on this, just to inform them what's happening. I'm hoping to attend the Pavilion Lake Group Annual General Meeting, talk to them about it. We're meeting with Lillooet Council on June 7th. This has been discussed extensively, at least in Area B, and with the Lillooet Agriculture and Food Society, obviously as well. They're working closely with us on this. So the next item is staff reports and other business.
Nothing for me on 9.1, Chair.
Okay. 9.2 is a request for a decision from Metro Vancouver Regional District on their growth strategy. And I see Ms. Needham's hand.
Yeah, Chair, I can speak to this really briefly. This is a referral from Metro Vancouver. They've been working on updating their regional growth strategy since 2019. SLRD has been involved throughout. In October of 2021, staff from Metro did a delegation to the board. And essentially, this is just a referral for us to, the SLRD, to accept the Metro RGS.
Are there questions for Ms. Needham? And
I'll make the motion.
thank you,
second it.
Director Richmond, Director Mack, seconds. Anyone opposed? Motion is carried. Direction request, Agricultural Land Commission, non-farm use application 65092, Squamish Valley Area 2. Now,
Perhaps Ms. Needham could explain the purpose of this item.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Ms. Koterniak's on the line, but I can speak to this. So this is related to the previous TUP application. So in order to run the event on that piece of property in the Upper Squamish Valley, they required a ALR permission because the land is not, it's not a designated farm. So I think that the decision on the TUP this morning would probably determine which of the options the board wished to go for in this case. Typically, if a board is not in support of an application to the ALC, they will either just not forward it to the ALC, or they would reject it and forward that opposition to the ALC.
And I see Ms. Koterniak's here now too. Did you?
So if we chose option 3, which do not support the application and direct staff to not forward this application to the ALC would know that we hadn't forwarded it?
No, it would just sort of end there. And I'm sorry, there are two option 3s.
So
sometimes counting's
oh, I'm
hard.
sorry, I was talking about the first option 3. So if we do the only option 2, and if we didn't support it, but we forward the application, then it's clearly on that application that we don't support it?
Correct.
Okay, I'll move option 2.
And that's seconded by Director Demare. I don't see any hands on the screen. Is there opposition? Seeing none.
Director Stoller had to.
Director Stoner. I don't see your hand against the background that I see. Yes.
You're muted on this, yes.
I was just going to register my opposition. I think that if we aren't supportive, we should just let this die and not waste staff time to forward it to the ALC. So I'm opposed.
Sorry, I didn't understand that. You're saying that we're wasting time, we should just forward it to the, say that again, Jen, I didn't hear.
I'm just opposed to the motion on the floor because I think if we are not supportive of the application, we should just, I would have been supportive of option 3A, where we just don't do anything with it and then our staff don't have to do the process of writing their, of the next steps. I think it's a waste of staff time to carry this forward if we're not supportive.
Well, the purpose of my questions to staff was, I want the ALC to know that we're not supporting it. Not that they just haven't received something from us, that they know that it's not supported.
Okay, so you want to stay with what you moved. Do not support the application and direct staff to forward this application to the ALC. Is that right?
He moved and seconded, yeah.
You called the question.
I did.
And so
it's done.
I did not have you as
Director Stoner was
She
question.
did, that's why Director
I'm
Stoner
just
opposed.
registering my opposition as a vote. That's really why my hand was up.
I'm sorry. I'm with you now. And so for the minutes, it will be reflected that Director Stoner.
yes, yep.
Got it. I'm getting pretty tired, you guys.
Doing great.
Keep moving forward.
And that's where we're at, audited financial statements.
Yep.
Okay. So Suzanne comes back,
What's that?
page 351 in my package.
What's that? The wrong agenda here. What's there an amended agenda? Because I missed it.
Okay, Ms. LaFrance, thank you. We're talking about the 2021 audited financial statements with the auditor's report.
Okay, yeah, I'm Suzanne LaFrance, the Director of Finance, and I'm just presenting the 2021 financial statements with the auditor's report. So these are the exact same statements that the board viewed at the special meeting the beginning of this month. And this is just adding the addition of the BDO auditor's report as they submit this only after board approval. So it's just the final statements that will be filed away for 2021.
Are there questions? Matt?
Move to accept.
Accept, seconder, Barb seconded that.
To receive.
To receive. Motion to receive. Okay, Director Matt, seconded
Yes.
by Director Reed.
Yeah.
And no one's opposed. Seeing none, the motion is carried. Thank you. And now we're looking at the first quarter financials, all services.
Yeah, so I'll present just briefly the first quarter financials for 2022. Not a lot happens in the first quarter, so there's still, I can't really have an opinion on what the year will look like, but for what I can comment on, the interest rates luckily have been increasing. So I've noticed that the budgeted interest is a little bit higher than this time last year, which is great. And I assume that will continue. So we could receive more interest revenue versus last year. We also have already received almost 50% of the budgeted building inspection permit fees. So although that's not a regional service, building inspections will have probably over budget revenues this year as well as last year. And the only other comment is there will be a lot of time allocation expense for the permanent transfer station that could go over and above the current budget. I'll be presenting these to PVIS, so the permanent transfer station and all of the other PVIS first quarter financials at the PVIS meeting, as well as I'll be presenting the EAD services to the EAD committee in June. So basically not a lot happening, but I can answer any specific questions that you have.
Motion to receive.
Director Mack, motion to receive, seconded by Director Mayor. Discussion of that, seeing none, that is carried. The financials received. And then infrastructure and planning grant. That's good. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Angela Belstrom, Director of Environmental Services with the SLRD, and I am joined remotely via Zoom, but by Celia Albertson, who's the accountant, who assisted in preparing the report. So the request for decision before you is in respect to the submission of grant applications to the 2022 intake of the Canada Community Building Fund for 3 capital infrastructure projects and 1 capacity building project. So the program contributes a maximum of 100% of the cost of eligible activities, and the program is accepting submissions until June 30th. Staff have identified 3 projects as ideal candidates for the infrastructure stream, that being Pemberton North Water Main Replacement, the Divine Water Main Replacement and Treatment System, and the Sea to Sky Trail Cheakamus Canyon section. And for the capacity building stream, an integrated climate change and asset management plan for sustainable service delivery for Area D. Details associated with the grant and the reasoning behind the projects are outlined in the report, and staff are available to address any questions you may have.
Director Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Belstrom. I'm just curious what the process was to pick the 3 ones that you picked here that were picked by staff. Because we still got that 1 project for the Braylord water main move, which is hindering getting the road repaved from the water main or from the wastewater project.
Through the chair, if I could address that question. It was a challenging decision as we went through the matrix associated with the infrastructure projects. There are a number of projects throughout the SLRD that are in great need of capital funding. We went through the asset register to look at that. Some of the requirements of the grant require feasibility studies, and we did have feasibility studies, detailed feasibility studies for all of these projects. The Pemberton water main project was one of the ones that topped the list, as it was defined by the board in 2019 as an infrastructure need based on the aging water mains. So they're dated 1980, they're beyond their life, and they are in need of attention. And this was a great opportunity because we were not successful in that 2020 grant application. The other one was the Divine Water System, because currently that water system doesn't meet the fire underwriter survey guidelines for fire flows. So if there was a fire in that community, we currently don't have the water capacity in which to meet the need. So that's where that project came in, and it is a very big project because not only does it require water main replacement, it requires the addition of a reservoir, and by adding that second reservoir, it would be a requirement of VCH to treat the water because of the second standing reservoir waters. So we have spoken at length with VCH on that, and also the requirements for the firefighting. And so that one topped the list. And then the Sea to Sky Trail was the other one based on the report that was brought to the board this morning.
Okay, thank you.
Not seeing any hands. item. Director Matt, sorry.
Well, I'll move this as presented.
Okay. Anyone opposed? Thank you. Carried. Nine point seven is gone. Or now my numbers are gonna be out.
Okay. So what's the before and regional business liaison?
Okay. Patricia.
Thank you.
And this is the regional business liaison?
Yes.
From NDIT. Thank you.
Yes, so thank you. Nice to see everyone again. Patricia Westerholm, Communications and Engagement Manager with the SLRD. And I am joined remotely with Mandy Rousseau, who has been with us for the past year in the position of Regional Business Liaison, which is a one-year grant-funded position that we've had. And we are nearing the end of that term. So we have prepared an information report for you that's in your agenda package, as well as a PowerPoint presentation. Excuse me. Mandy is going to share some of her insights from the last year and some thoughts on moving forward. And without further ado, I will pass it over to Mandy to walk through that PowerPoint presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Mandy Russo. I'm the Regional Business Liaison for the SLRD. I'm mindful that you've been at this for a while, so there's more detail in the slides and there's plenty of detail in your package. I'll try and flow through this quickly. Next slide, please, Pip. So the first couple of slides are going to look familiar to you from when we first presented in October. So Pip, if we hop to the next slide, please. This one also reflects the timeline of the program. And so right now we're just at the wrap-up stages. We'll be doing our final report next week. Next slide, please, Pip. So in terms of outreach, there was a great deal with local governments, First Nations organizations, and direct to businesses, initially to understand their situations and the type of supports they were looking for, and then to research the various opportunities and connect the dots. Next slide, please, Pip. Here, the blue opportunities reflect what I would have shared with you back in October, and yellow reflects what occurred over the last few months. So of note would be the Canada Digital Adoption Program, the Tourism Accommodation and Commercial Recreation Relief Fund, amongst some other opportunities. Next slide, please. Again, same with the color coding. Blue are ones that we remain consistent in communicating that we shared back in October. And now then there were some new ones, such as the Consulting Hive, which provided some expert advisory free of charge for small and medium-sized enterprises. Tourism HR Canada was providing some great toolkits when it came to labor, and Wellness Together Canada was a federal government initiative to support with mental health and awareness in the workplace. Next slide, please. So the most obvious results of the outreach work is being able to connect these groups with the resources that they needed. The work that we have done through the RBL program has also helped to build the reputation of the SLRD in the region and beyond. We've raised awareness of the work that entities like local chambers of commerce and community futures are doing. For example, we heard from several businesses who weren't aware of the community futures organizations and the work that they do and how community futures might be able to assist them. With the region's chambers of commerce, the level of support provided to businesses varies depending on the size of the chamber and the resources available to them. And I was able to fulfill areas of need for those chambers with limited resources, as well as for those well-equipped serving larger populations that were spread a bit thin. We also made connections with First Nations communities, such as providing warm introductions to capacity building opportunities, grant funders, and potential collaborators for capital projects. As we know, relationship building and trust building takes time, and this work helped to further the SLRD's efforts there. Next slide, please. So rolling out a communications plan to support the RBL program was a big component of the work that we did. And it was really important to make sure that we were getting a message out there that this program was available. So through media outreach, a strong website presence, and robust social media campaign, we were able to build a brand for the RBL program and keep good momentum over the course of the year. Many thanks is also due to the many organizations and local governments who helped to amplify our message. Our content was redistributed in their newsletters, blog posts, on social media, and their websites. Next slide, please. The most impactful piece of our communications plan was the social media campaign, and with most of our posts reaching hundreds of people. So these are some of the posts that we drafted that shared information about funding opportunities. Next slide, please, Pip. And then these, this one is a reflection of some resources that we shared. Next slide, please. And this is also an example of how we were sharing, spreading the word rather, on community futures, both operating in Sun Country and in Howe Sound, and chambers of commerce. Next slide, please. So through those, in working with our partners, sharing of those resources and of funding opportunities, we were able to reach nearly 20,000 with hundreds of engagements. So the reach is the number of people who saw the post at least once. And ultimately this social media campaign really helped to build awareness of the Regional Business Liaison program. Next slide, please. While we don't have a dollar amount to tie to the connections that were made, we can report a number of wins from the program. So we supported 57 businesses with the Tourism Relief Fund applications and COVID-19 closure relief grants. We supported 40 nonprofit organizations access various funds, such as the Farmers Market grant and the BC Arts and Culture Infrastructure Fund. We participated in 57 collaborative discussions with working groups. We attended more than 140 unique meetings, and we ultimately supported all SLRD municipalities and electoral areas. Next slide, please. The key findings are not going to be a surprise to anyone. In terms of the recovery information, we heard from businesses and organizations that there was a lack of accessibility and the process was overwhelming. We also heard that sometimes the opportunities available did not necessarily reflect what was needed in that moment. What we all know is that labor is an issue for every community in the region, and that really reared its head about halfway through my term. What we also found through much of our work in this program is that while municipal governments and First Nations are spearheading unique projects for the future resiliency of local economies, this work is not being done on a regional scale and is often done in silos. So communities aren't always talking to each other, even though what happens in one is often impacting another and vice versa. The biggest finding here, and something that could be a future consideration, is that there is an opportunity to connect all of this work through regional collaboration for the benefit of the entire region as we work towards economic resiliency. Next slide, please. So this rolls nicely into themes for future consideration. Much of this work has been about relationship building, and some of the initial feedback questioned how the SLRD would keep supporting going would keep support going once the term wrapped up. So while the RBL program itself is winding down, with no indication that it would be extended, some communities are continuing with the work by rolling it into community or regional economic development liaison positions, and this might be something the SLRD wishes to consider. There is an opportunity to not only continue this work, but also weave it into other economic development related activities, more formally recognizing the opportunity for regional economic development work, such as supporting the agricultural economic initiatives, supporting the Northern Economic Development and Initiatives Committee, supporting the Pemberton Area Economic Development Collaborative, addressing unconstrained growth, and of course, addressing labor needs. While we will get to the end of the pandemic, working towards economic resiliency is going to continue to be something that all of our communities are facing in different ways, with different resources and sometimes different situations. Next slide, please. We wanted to leave you with a few testimonials that we think sum up the program quite well. I will leave you to have a look at these at a later time. Next slide, please. And yes, so as we are nearing the end of the program, the next steps for us are to wrap up with the various agencies we've been talking to, as well as the organizations, to let them know that the program is coming to an end, and then to submit our final grant reporting documents to NDIT. I've greatly enjoyed my time with the SLRD. It has been an incredible learning opportunity. It has been fulfilling to support those who need it, and it has been a privilege to work with all corners of a region that has always been my home. Next slide, please. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Wow.
Thank you, Mandy.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah. Well done. And certainly for Area B, you really had a presence there in a really tough time with COVID. And when I did finally see you in the SLRD office with no mask on, I didn't recognize you. But I saw you a lot in B. And you really had a positive influence there in many ways. Thank you. Motion to receive this report. Is that what we're going to do?
I to congratulate Mandy on the quality of it.
I do congratulate you on the quality.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Moved and seconded. Any opposed? No. Okay. And best wishes, and we'll see you here again.
Bye, everyone.
Request for decision, Municipal Natural Assets Initiative, expression of interest. And do we go to 5 o'clock, or what's the rule here?
I don't know what the rule is.
I was wondering that, like, I know in our council, if we go over a certain amount of hours, we have to get a motion to extend the meeting. to a
Right, we
certain
have to
one.
do that too.
I don't know if we need to do that here after 14 hours or so, but.
Well, no, I mean, technically we only started at 10:30.
Yeah, wow. Feels like 10 minutes ago.
Some of us
half hour
started
lunch.
earlier.
I have a meeting that starts at 5:30, so
You have a meeting.
know that I'll be leaving.
I think 5 o'clock is sort of reasonable,
Yeah.
working here, and can we not pick this up in the morning, some of this work?
We have the choice. We have
Okay.
to-
I'm not coming back this evening, just to be
No.
clear.
Why not? You have
All
other
right.
plans?
Let's see, yes, to have some dinner, the pool.
So we're gonna do any more than tonight, or? Yeah, we've got 8 minutes, we can wrap some of this up.
Maybe vote 9.8.
Yeah, Miss Morgan and Schubert are here. They've joined us. If you
Oh,
want to-
well, definitely then, hello.
Yeah.
Could we please talk about,
Oh, that's,
which is what is now item 9.8? Municipal Natural Assets Initiative, expression of interest, yes. Please go ahead, Ms. Morgan.
Through you, Chair, I'm going to hand this one over to Ms. Shoebridge.
Hello, Ms. Shoebridge.
Hello, thank you. Through the chair, I would suggest that at this late hour, this report speaks for itself, and just invite questions from the board if there are any.
Thank you, and I see a question from Director Stoner.
Yeah, just briefly, thank you so much for bringing this opportunity forward, and I think it's very exciting. I just have a question around staff capacity and ability to take it on. I know when I tried to broaden the scope of our asset management plan, there was a little bit of hesitation from our finance staff, and so I just wanted to take a temperature check that we're not biting off too much so we can chew.
I can, through the chair, I can tackle that one. I think the beauty of this particular roadmap exercise is that it involves minimal staff time, 6 to 12 hours, and just of 3 staff from the organization. So something that was attractive about this to both Ms. Shoebridge and I was that it was a way to get a feel for how this might work in a wider sense in the organization without committing either a lot of funding or a lot of staff time.
With that, I'm happy to move the recommendation. Thank you for the detail.
Thank you, Jenna is moving this, and
I'll second.
Director Richmond is seconding. And is there any opposition? Seeing none, that is moved. And Did we want to look at 9.9 or stop right now? Okay.
That one probably needs
I
some
think,
time,
I
yeah.
think we should, I would entertain a motion to adjourn until 9 AM tomorrow morning, Director Rainbow. Same time, same bat channel. All right.